Hey, is this working? Is this thing on? Howdy, everyone. We have audio, we have video. Nothing fell apart yet. Yet. So, how's everybody doing?
Oh, wow. I gotta turn the sound off on my
Yeah, you should probably turn the sound down over there if you're,
sound off on my computer.
So, hey, look at that.
Shut up.
So, what are we doing tonight? It is Jayberry's over there doing some stuff, but she should wave because we are celebrating both my birthday and Jayberry's birthday tonight at midnight. It is my birthday, and when is your actual birthday?
Saturday.
Saturday. So yeah.
Woohoo.
That's. Hey, look! I bet you that's a notification that we're streaming.
That went off like
Hey, what's up, man? How's it going? It's Mr. Van Tassel.
Hi, Fran.
Jayberry is over in the corner, Dave. We played with him, and oh, I forgot her name. I'm sorry. He did not play Slivers. He played what did he play? Cats.
Oh yeah, that's not surprising.
Yeah, or Arbo or Abo.
You never.
Yeah.
And then we murdered them together.
Like you do.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We appreciate the happy birthdays. What else? Oh, we have a new player tonight, Clover.
Hello.
Hello. We met. Blue and I met Clover at Gen Con.
Yes.
Gen Con. So, and lo and behold, she is relatively local. So we have a new Mickey. Thank you. We have a new person to join us on an ongoing basis. Not all the time, obviously, but hey, it might actually be all women. Oh God, it might actually be all women's Magic. You know, when we actually have 4 people to play and I'm running the computer or something. Hey, Banshee.
Banshee. Nine Inch Nails is not the greatest thing to play while
Yes.
on stream, and also you guys got muted last week.
Yeah, 9 Inch Nails is gonna get me muted. We got muted?
You got muted last week. I got a notification from
Not last
Facebook.
time before last.
Whenever y'all streamed
Gotcha.
last, I got a notification from Facebook saying that they'd muted us.
Gotcha.
Which is fine. It was
You
only
know what,
45
I should-
seconds, so it didn't really matter.
Gotcha. So, I went through and pulled up commanders. So, we'll start over there on the far end. Clover is playing Animar. So, that's going to be awful, I'm sure.
Not optimized NMR, so it's not horrific.
Uh-huh. And then NPC is playing Gitrog. So
Frog
it's
monster.
all land
sorry,
shenanigans.
frog horror.
It's still fucking Fog Monster. Sorry, that's what I heard, Fog Monster. And it's literally, what is the stupid one that it's in every deck?
Constant Miss.
Constant Miss, because you know, when you're fucking around with lands over and over
Or
again.
how about the glacial land?
Yeah.
Hi,
Val is playing Death on a Stick,
my baby.
and I am playing one of the new commanders. I'm going to play Savine.
Oh goodness.
Savine?
By the way, we went to Dragon Con, some of us.
Oh yeah, here,
And
hold on.
Jayberry got me cool squirrel tokens
Oh, yeah.
to play with my frog horror.
Hey.
There we go. Yeah.
Neat.
They're like
They're
D&D
so
squirrel
adorable.
tokens.
Oh, you're going to love these. You haven't seen these yet.
Made by Jason Engel. Oh yeah, I've been
They
considering
are Halloween
getting
cat
this.
backers.
Where did you get those?
I found them on Amazon. I was
Yeah,
literally just doing a
Amazon.
search for silly things and they came up on
silly
Amazon.
things.
I indeed found silly things.
Fucking nerds.
Yep, we are fucking nerds.
And I got my cool thing from Dragon Con.
What'd you get? Your
is
cool thing.
I got.
Oh,
Let's see.
it's gotta change it.
Hold on.
Oh, here, hold on.
I got a Skirt Stag High Priest
Signed
Snippets.
from Jason Engel
with.
with a original sketch on the back.
Yeah. Actually, can you go grab that thing right over there on the counter? And
Yeah.
I'll hold it
I
up.
didn't-
Yes,
I did not
Frozen
bring mine,
Flaming,
sadly.
we are fucking
Yeah, we are
nerds.
indeed fucking nerds.
That's Jake. Jake's big fucking nerd.
This is my super special purchase from.
Although
It's
it's
really
hard to
hard
see.
to
I'll
see.
do
anyway.
it this way.
Very, very late.
I'm gonna do it this way. So,
Oh
that,
my goodness.
by the way,
Love it.
is the original sketch for Illusory Angel. Ooh,
Yeah.
pretty cool.
His artwork
Thank you.
is
Appreciate it.
Yep. I also got an
Fantastic.
original sketch that I didn't bring.
Alan Williams.
Okay.
Yeah, Alan's
Yeah,
awesome.
good stuff.
Like, I got some of his original pieces.
If you get a chance to ever meet Alan Williams and his wife, they are the
They are, yeah.
nicest, funniest people. I like had such a blast just hanging out at their
Awesome.
booth. So if you ever get to see them at a con, Highly recommend. Also,
Do you
buy
know
their
if they're
stuff.
going to
Buy the art.
IllexCon?
I don't.
We should check that out.
Yeah, I'll bet you if you go to the IllexCon website, it'll list the artists that are going to be
Really?
there.
Is the site organized this year?
It's about as organized as it ever is.
So no. You know I love me some EllexCon though.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Here, in honor of. Where the
God
fuck is it?
Sucks?
In honor of God Sucks, I will find the sacred D12. Rawr.
Somewhere.
There we go.
Maybe.
I have an 11.
I have an 11 as well.
There you go. Roll again after, unless she gets a 12.
Nope. 4. That's a 9.
All right. I think I'm not going first.
7.
7. You are first.
Okay.
And for Clover, who may not know.
Friendly games.
Yes, so
Yeah.
we do partial parasmonic, which is basically look at your opening hand. If you need lands, you can discard cards from your hand face up and say, I need this color and this color. And you reveal until you hit a land that makes that color. Then you put them in your hand and you shuffle everything else back in.
Okie dokie.
Like that.
Yeah. I mean, we want to see what the decks do. We just don't want to sit around watching people get land
Do you
hosed.
feel like you have a hand?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm going to start. I'm drawing since we can draw.
Yep.
And then I'm going to play a Grigori Guildgate. Pass turn.
Are we going around this way?
Yep.
Yes. Clockwise. Always clockwise.
Just gonna throw it on a mountain and pass turn.
I have 8. Because I'm an idiot.
I was going to ask, do you have all
Swiftwater
your
Cliffs.
colors?
It's not
Do you have, yeah.
But I
Swiftwater
pulled 3
Cliffs,
lands
41
my
pass
first round.
turn.
Ooh, rocket fuel.
You literally you brought it for me for my birthday and then you said no, you declined to have ice or a whiskey stone. So you're literally just drinking straight bourbon.
That's how you do it.
Yep.
Okay.
It's been a rough day.
Yep. Okay, I'm
Like,
going
really?
to untap, upkeep, draw.
Sure.
But we're at the.
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, honestly, since this is early, I am probably going to do this to make my life easier. And I've got nothing I want to play for that. Can I do that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
What is that?
It's Earl Grey
7,
tea.
8.
Oh, I mean it's
Actually,
it's a cool little container.
I got it at World Market
I
forever ago.
probably
Container with
don't
a little
want
tea
to
strainer that pops
do
out the top.
that.
Yeah, like it
Double
looks like this
wall.
crazy ass thing.
That's
It was like
irritating.
$6.
Cool.
I'd love to get another one.
You know what? Fine. I'm going to play Forest.
It's gonna last time.
I'm going to tap
Cool.
2, or no, I lied. Promise, it's only slightly going to be a shit
I
show.
hyped today.
I'm
That's
going
awesome.
to tap
Congratulations.
1
I
forest
actually see some sun on you, which is
and
freaky.
No, I don't
play
have any
Chattering
foundation on, is
of
what
the
that
was.
Squirrel.
I
Chattering of the
hyped
Squirrel.
today.
Oh, really? Really? Are you're playing that and you're going to put a squirrel token in?
Yes, I'll put my warrior squirrel token in.
Okay. You have a warrior
cute.
squirrel.
So cute. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Play forest and anything you want to do.
This can't go in the trash.
All right. So I
That's
see
it.
a red and a green.
Pass turn.
All right. That'll do. I should have played the other one because I'm an idiot. Fine. I'll be slow.
By the way, folks, we have updated our Patreon.
I can't. Windscarred Crag
Oh no.
to Soul Ring pass turn.
We have updated our Patreon where you will actually get things.
Yes.
Hey, how about that?
You should look at our Patreon. It's-
Yes.
What is the address? It's patreon.com/CovenMTG. Right? Am I right? Jaybird?
I'm pretty
I'm
sure
done.
you're right. I was in the middle of trying to create a post.
Ah.
Okay. Untap.
Yes.
Upkeep,
Yes, that
draw.
is correct.
Gotcha.
A quick rundown of what our rewards are going to be
Ooh.
in between gameplay is $2 a month gets you a personal shout out. Then $4.99 a month will get you entered into a raffle. to get a signed card
Every-
or artist
yeah.
proof from an MTG artist. We already have a few lying in wait, so we're gonna
Woohoo.
tease you and not tell you what they are yet. But the first one we're going to be raffling off will be on our Halloween stream. It is Thursday night is a Halloween night on October 31st, 2019. So think about signing up for that $5 tier and you'll get entered into a raffle for one of those cards. And we have some really good ones and I'm not going to tell you what they are. And if you're feeling really special and you want to help us update our equipment, our play space, all of that stuff, we have a $19.99 tier where we'll pick out something really special for you. But we also will take suggestions. Like for that tier, what would you like to see as a gift chosen for you by the Coven? So that's my spiel. I'm gonna run away now.
Okay.
I see you later.
So
Dark-Link.
I am going to tap 3, and I'm going to play Growth Spasm.
Ow! It's spasming.
And unless someone thinks they're gonna mess with my library, I can do that.
Get go.
Okay. And could you hand me like the
What do you need?
the Scion?
Oh, you need some Eldrazi Scion.
Eldrazi, sorry. It's a 0/1, the one that becomes mana.
What'd you get? You got one of them?
Yeah.
I should get the token box, but fuck it. For an Eldrazi Scion, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You done?
Yeah. Because again, I don't think you guys are gonna mess with my stuff yet.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not that it's not that early in the game.
Let's do man tower.
2 minutes. 2 minutes earlier.
Tap 4 blue and bring out.
Oh, hey, Animar's in already. Let's bring that up. Just, you know. Oh, that would be my commander. I should go back. 1, 2, 3. Whoop, wrong
It's going
way.
to
Nope.
be painful.
One more.
There we go.
All right. Protection from white and black.
By the way, my squirrel is green,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
come at me.
What is that whole? Are you done over there?
Yes, I'm done.
That whole Emrakul 15. How
15
shall
squirrel
I?
versus-
How
Yes.
can I face the awesome wrath of 15/1/1 squirrels? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's do it that way. I'm gonna play an emergence zone. Can I do that? No, I can't. It doesn't really matter. So let's do this. Yeah, I can. All right, emergence zone and a soul ring for a burnished heart, and these two for blind obedience.
Oh, Christ.
So artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Let me bring that up just because everybody fucking loves blind obedience.
So much.
And you complain every time I play it.
Yeah, and there's a
And
reason I
here
play
we
it.
are.
And yet here we are.
So what you're saying is attacking.
Sure. Pass turn.
Oh, I had a question for DM.
Ah. Asshole. No, I would never be an asshole. Cave Girl has a question for me. Yes, my dear.
From these 3 restaurants, pick one.
Oh, well.
Do you want to read this on stream? Oh, I guess I know
It's-
roughly where
Morton's,
Morton's.
La Tosca,
Mm-hmm.
or Urban Butcher?
Whatever your heart desires.
No, this is
I
for you.
love all 3 of those.
This is for you tomorrow night.
Let's do Urban Butcher.
You can do it.
Okay, we haven't done that in a while.
Yeah. And I hear tell
What
there would
time?
be
What's up, Rick?
up to you, baby. Whatever, because you're gonna want some time to decompress when you get home,
Yeah.
unless you want to meet me there. So, plus extort is indeed a great
That's
mechanic.
true. It's 5
Are you done?
So.
NPC, you're up.
Oh, fuck. Untap.
Yeah,
Upkeep,
I
draw.
could meet you there.
can you do that? Like 6-ish even if you want to do early.
I'll see if
Because it's your first. I know it's your first week of work and you'll be exhausted.
There's a little happy hour at work at 4 o'clock, so.
They know us and we can sit at the bar if we have to. So why don't we just play by ear?
Huh. Do I actually want to do
Well,
that?
it's Friday night.
It feels like it's kind of.
But I'm saying we could just sit at the bar.
Do that.
You're just chuckling over there. I'm like, what did I miss?
Me talking to myself, probably.
I'm sorry, what? Was there discussion going on somewhere? What are you doing?
I'm telling them
loud.
to feed the cat.
Okay. Do I want to do that? Sorry, reading is hard.
We always forget that this deck, you're not dithering, but there's a lot of decisions to be made in that deck.
Yeah, and the problem is, I know why I want to make this decision.
Hey, Dragon Gem.
What happens with the rest of them? Bottom of your lip, fine.
It is my birthday at midnight. I'm just telling everybody.
Right now, I'm not playing a land yet. So
'Cause you wanna play
I'm tapping
Commander.
for I'm going to play the Animus Awakening.
I don't know what the hell that does, so let's look it up.
Reveal the top, and I'm
Animus
doing it for
Awakening?
3. Yes. Dang it! Constant miss. Why?
Thank you. I like it when that's in your graveyard. Now somebody should exile that graveyard immediately.
It's not in my graveyard.
Oh, it
goes
just
at the
reveals
bottom.
and it gets shuffled.
And since I had 2 or more instant or sorcery cards, this gets untapped. The
Sure.
command tower. Wait, does it have to be a basic land or does it just land? All land. So I'm good. I'm just gonna put this here. And then.
Hey, Dragon Gem, thank you for subscribing.
Hello.
So what about that photo thing not working?
So this is the computer we used the first time we ever streamed. So I
Stream
guess
key's
the
wrong.
stream key's wrong everywhere else.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Since I
Thank you for
haven't
subscribing.
Since I haven't played land per turn and I played that spell, I'm going to take back a forest, my hand, and play the Golgari Rock Farm.
You got it.
That's an easy fix.
And then, by the way,
Congratulations, you did such a good job.
do we need to have it so loud?
No.
The music.
I'm sorry, what?
And I'm done.
Okay. Not super what I wanted, but okay. So putting Vivid Creek in tapped.
Vivid, that's the fairy one.
No,
No, it makes yes. Free
I
count.
just charge counters.
Got it.
Ooh, I like your little container.
Gen Con.
Oh,
I
that's
so
spent
nice.
too much money.
Hey,
Show it.
I
Pick it up. That's
Yep.
awesome.
like.
So,
I feel ya.
It's-
That was me at Dragon
and then
Con.
it comes with.
Wow. Did it come with all that shit?
No, so
Oh.
that's only part of my dice collection. And then it comes with a rolling tray.
Oh,
Oh
nice.
That fits
wow!
underneath.
That is cool.
fancy.
So.
Awesomeness.
$3 at a thrift store for a pirate chest.
Okay, I've got like.
It's like
I have
cool.
a lot of old Ipsy bags filled with dice.
Oh, that's funny.
Nice.
So, and then.
Okay. Let me
You're
assess
making me do a
this.
thing that I don't really want to do, but otherwise.
Who's making us?
He
Okay.
is.
Me?
Yes.
What would
Oh,
I- what
blind
could I
obedience?
pull?
Yeah, so I'm playing Whole Reach to destroy your enchantment.
Yeah, alright.
Nice.
I really like the artwork in the new. The
I'm
new set.
liking her already. She understands how to play at this table.
Yes, she does. She understands what the threat is.
Yeah.
And she was very nice about it too.
That's all I'm gonna do.
Oh,
You were very
trailer-
nice about
The
that.
trailer was great.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna do
I
that.
appreciate that. I really do. Because you could have just shut me out of the game.
Oh,
Can I read Hull Breach?
oh. Choose one destroy target artifact or destroy target enchantment, or destroy target artifact and target enchantment.
Right, I have a soul ring and a
Yep.
burnished heart.
Yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate that. Did you just forget
Well,
about that part?
Also, like I don't like destroying people's
It's
mana sources really early.
thank you. You do know how to play at this table.
We don't like playing land fuckery.
No.
I mean, if targeted land destruction, like to kill a Cabal Coffer or
Yeah.
to kill,
or
that
if you're
creatures
able to
can't attack her. Yeah.
Or to shut down the game and like win.
Yes, that land admittedly needs to die. But then again, if I'm not bouncing it each turn, it's slowly killing me.
You're absolutely right.
Progressively killing me because it gets.
Temple of Epiphany comes in tapped and I scry, right? Yep. Let's see.
I guess when you have a moment, you
I can
could pull
stay.
it up, but I can't remember what it's called.
Glacial
Like-
Chasm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll bring it up in a second.
Oh, my little
I'm gonna
frog
play a
card.
Seal
The arm in
of
his mouth.
Cleansing and pass turn. And
What
was
does that do? The seal of.
It's an enchantment that lets me sack it to destroy an artifact or enchantment. It's a permanent that's basically
Yeah.
artifact or enchantment dead, killing a stick. And what was I pulling up?
Glacial Chasm.
Ah, yeah.
Some creatures.
So, in Get Rug, this is good if you, like, bounce it, bring it back, bounce it, bring it back.
Right.
Because Get Rug, you sacrifice a land.
yeah.
Right, so you just keep sacking it and then bringing it
At the
back over
beginning
and
of
over
my
again,
upkeep.
and no one will ever be able to attack her.
But if I don't, like, cumulative.
Yeah.
And
you
it's
know.
not only creatures can't attack you, it's that prevent all damage that would be dealt to you.
Yeah.
So that is why we save the targeted land destruction.
From Guardian.
But it
His enchantment.
life loss isn't
Yeah.
considered damage, right? Damage is considered life loss, but not the other way around.
Correct. Yep.
Are you
Which is
dead?
why Exsanguinate's awful and Torment of Hellfire is
yeah.
awful.
At the end of your turn, I'm sacking my little Scion guy, and I'm tapping the to give myself another squirrel, and then
Hear the lamentations of the women. Sorry,
Nick.
Rick was talking about the Conan thing, and if you've ever seen Conan the musical, the Hear the lamentations of the women.
Okay.
Not seen
So,
Oh, I have to
No.
play it for you later. It's like a 3-minute song. It's amazing.
Now I untap,
I know of it.
upkeep, draw.
Just never seen it.
It's only
Okay.
like it's like a trailer, but it's like a 4-minute song about
Do I keep this? Do I let it go?
Crush your enemies.
Have you seen the trailer for Throne of Eldraine yet?
For what? With the
For the new set?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched it earlier too.
The animated one, I'm assuming because they've been doing that lately.
I mean, the quality is really, really high.
Oh, I'm
It's
sure.
good.
Everybody's
Because the
calling
quality of the artwork
yeah.
is really,
I mean,
really
everybody's
high.
calling it Shrek set now.
Basically, yeah. Yeah.
But it's,
Sure, why not?
It's so good.
It's
2,
glorious.
Yeah. No, it really is pretty neat.
3,
looking.
4. So I'm tapping
There's a fucking
4.
Omar Ryan card. Like,
We'll
holy
see if
shit.
we'll see if you let this stay, or if there's worse things out there that are to
always
come.
That can stay for now.
But I'm playing parallel lives.
That can absolutely stay for now.
And pass turn.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh wait, did I play land per turn? No, I didn't. So.
Garrick returns. Yes, it is the return of Garrick.
I know, I'm so excited.
Oh, wolf deck, Garrick. You saw how that one Garrick worked.
Is the new Garrick a wolf Garrick or
Yes.
is it
Yes.
a beast
He is
Garrick?
still a
He makes
wolf.
wolves.
Okay.
So,
I see
Big
my
Greg.
wolf deck getting an upgrade, or having another planeswalker in it. Hey, I made wolves happen. They
That's all I know
happen.
how to do.
How many people are going to have some cake? So there's, obviously you. I know you're not. Would you like any? It's either red velvet or carrot cake.
Carrot cake,
Not
please.
a lot.
yeah.
It's not a lot, so it's just a little
Carrot
bit.
cake,
Tiny
please.
little bit of red
Tiny,
velvet.
yeah, little bit. And do you want one or the other?
I'll red velvet.
Okay.
I'll take whatever.
The reason we're talking about cake is it is my birthday at midnight and Jay Berry's birthday on Saturday, so we're celebrating our birthdays today. Tonight, now-ish.
And it's your beautiful wife's birthday next week.
It is. Beautiful. She's gorgeous.
It's a demon.
So-
She is. Oh, and I'll have to show that later. I got another demon, Cave Girl demon token.
Paying 2 and a green for Avid Reclaimer.
What does it do?
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't think I've seen that.
It's one of the crappy cards from an intro deck. But it's a mana dork.
Oh,
So,
and it's a druid,
yeah. And so,
and it makes blue and green, so that works.
Ticks up.
Yup.
And
I always
Yeah.
look at druids because I realize that
So that means your creatures are going to cost 1 less.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
it begins.
All right, before my turn, I'm gonna crack the burnished heart. And I'm gonna put a. Come on. The fuck are you? 2 planes into play, right? I'm assuming that was end of turn.
Yes. Yes. Cool. Switch up for an easier to read one.
Rick says to tell you that he's wearing an AC-10 shirt. If you can, like, that's the stream, that's the comment stream
I'm
from
super
Twitch.
blind, so
Gotcha. All good.
But yay.
Yeah, I wish the text got bigger on that, but
I can make it actually a little bigger. I should probably take my turn first and then worry about that.
Yeah.
All right, untap.
Alright, girl.
She's like, where are you, Mom?
Keep draw.
I haven't seen you in minutes.
Down here.
This is gonna be amusing. Red, white, and blue.
Go sit and I'll light it and bring it.
Panharmonicon.
No.
I choose this way. So you can only attack me, I can only attack you, and you can only attack that way.
It's not Panharmonicon.
Did you play the?
Sorry,
it's a new thing.
Framicon.
Yeah.
Framicon, right?
Yeah, pull
it's
it up.
the America wall.
Right. When it comes into play, everybody has to choose left or right.
So
Well,
who
I choose.
attacks which way?
So
So I
The
can only
attacks-
attack
to our
Val?
right. Yeah.
that's correct.
Okay.
But I am protecting myself from the Animar ridiculousness.
We were going this way.
For,
The
Whatever,
order of the
fine.
game still continues,
Okay.
but you can only attack the person to your right.
Yeah, that's why.
okay.
Yay!
You.
Did you want to maybe do them in there and then bring the plates up?
Well, you have to bring the light up with the candles.
Aww! Oh, the little light up candle keys are coming out.
I'll do the whole thing.
All right, so the pram. Let me bring it up.
Sit in my lap.
Yes.
You ready about
We are ready.
Set it on
Especially
fire.
while people
Which
have
is amusing.
to read the
yes,
wall.
while people have to
Yes.
read the red, white, and blue wall.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Whoever thought this up was probably like, yeah, fuck you.
They were just giggling
Oh
to
no! Yeah, like
themselves the
literally, they're
entire
like,
time.
"Ooh, is Hasbro gonna let this through? Is Hasbro gonna let us do this to make
Oh, it's
fun
a
of
Richard
Trump?"
Wright, too.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it is perfect timing
It's
because
colors
that
and-
thing's gonna go nutty soon.
What is it? And you're sending it my way.
What?
Yes.
Ready?
I'm also sending this ridiculousness this way. Aww.
Aw.
All right, wait, I gotta bring the.
Ready?
Yay! Cave Girls bring.
Yay!
Aw, happy
It's-
birthday, by the way.
Happy birthday to you!
Happy birthday.
I'm gonna put it right here for the moment and you can blow it out.
Yeah.
Ready? Count of 3.
Oh, sorry,
1,
one.
2, 3.
Yay!
I half expected you to have the ridiculous.
The one.
Yeah,
slightly-
relighting candles.
How dare you?
So the cakes.
Oh,
Yeah.
cakes.
Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy
And
birthday.
maybe, I realized, yeah,
Happy
maybe
birthday.
serving on the plates in there would make a lot more
I'm,
sense.
yeah, I'm gonna
So
put
just
that
pass
right
them back
there.
this way and
Do you want
not.
to like stack
Thank
them
you,
so that they're-
Who wants carrot
And
cake besides Seth? You want carrot cake?
There we go. 2 carrot cakes.
Red
Um,
velvet. Tiny though.
I'm gonna pass turn. This is weird. Like, I've got a fine hand and a fine
Great
board
if I
state,
had some mana.
but not a single flashback
Yeah, I
card.
was gonna say, it's like it's not ticking yet.
Well, it doesn't need to tick as long as I'm control. Like that's, I'm controlling the flow of the game. Imagine
Yeah.
that I'm playing a control deck.
How's your red steering?
Perfectly fine. I took them right before dinner. Yeah, when the meds are gone, this game will probably be over. Whether I'm dead or not, when the meds are gone, this game will be over.
I can't wait anything.
Uh-oh.
You land hose, do you need to put one on top of your deck?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Then I have to discard because I didn't have land.
No, that's okay. Discard something that'll be useful.
It's a land.
What?
It's a land. That was
So
on the
put
bottom.
that on.
Oh.
NPC.
So it's
Oh,
on top.
thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you.
No, you turn
Thank
around.
you.
Merry Christmas.
And you want a carrot cake?
Yes,
How much
please.
do you want?
Small, fine.
Small size.
Woo! So while
I'm done.
Do
Food.
you want me to hold?
No.
Thank you, dear. I
Okay.
really appreciate it. That was
Upkeep,
incredibly
girl.
thoughtful of you stopping to get cake.
Yes, thank you.
Because, you know, we're not like kids anymore, and I didn't really expect cake on my birthday.
I mean, one of the greatest joys of adulthood is realizing you can just buy cake whenever you want.
Yes.
Yeah. Every now and
Do you
again.
want the big giant piece?
No. I'll have some tomorrow if I want some more.
Okay, there's that one.
Thank you.
Oh.
Oh my god! They actually put nuts on it! Which is
Carrot
awesome.
cake.
Well, no, because most places won't sell nuts on cake anymore, or in cake, or
Yeah.
donuts, or anything because of allergies.
Yep.
Put a fucking
Okay.
sticker on it. I have to dodge coconut and everything because they don't help you.
Actually, I'm going to
Oh, that's
do
good. Thank you,
this
hon.
way.
Clove and cinnamon and carrot.
Not that you would.
So
Robert.
I am
green
tapping.
cheese.
I'm tapping 4 to play Creekwood Leaf.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm bring that up so people know.
So again, if you send your commander my way, my squirrels are bigger and still
My
green.
Yep.
squirrels
Still
are
green.
bigger. That's a sentence.
That thing, right? Yep.
And I've not played land per turn, so I'm going to take this forest, return it to my hand, and play a jungle basin. And then, hey, look at that! I've got 3 mana and pets.
Hey, how much mana do you have in play right now?
Enough.
Let's have a little count there. I'm just curious.
Adequate amount.
Let's see. So this is 4. This is 5, 6, 7, 8.
Good to know. Good to know.
Hey,
Mana.
Gitrog needs a lot out.
I'm just gonna wave at Cape Girl sitting over there. You can come around and join us here if you
Yeah,
want.
it's comfy sitting here. So.
And voyeuring? Is that a word?
And
Voying?
I am done.
Well, the act of
That's
being a voyeur.
Voyeuring.
Voyeuring. There you go. I doubt that's the right word, but
No,
it sounds
it's
fun.
not.
Haha. Now I can
It's
have
the
cake.
exact wrong word.
I did not want magic cards, not cake. I got cake. I have enough magic cards. Believe it or not, I have enough magic cards.
You know you're just gonna buy more magic cards.
I
Shut
could
it.
have gotten a cake in the shape of a magic card.
You could have gotten a
That's
cake in
just
the
a
shape.
rectangle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's just a geometric shape.
But I don't think it would be hard to make them do an actual design of a magic card.
Well, I mean, you
So
know,
my
if you go to
friend-
Baskin Robbins, they'll print something.
Oh, yeah,
out
they'll do
on a
anything.
cake for you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Nick actually got a Pete
Development
Venter's
sheet.
Dragon Whelp for Kai for his birthday last year, remember?
Oh yeah.
So,
What's up, Samurai Dance Rules?
Hey,
So, welcome
as
back.
someone who's talking about IP, though, is that okay?
it's a birthday cake. What are you
cake
gonna
Oh,
do?
you're
so it's personal use,
Yeah.
right?
No, it's not. It's technically
No.
not
Oh,
okay.
true,
My
yeah.
dad was a baker, and I watched him
yeah.
put Cabbage Patch like in the day with
Yeah.
Cabbage Patch Kids and Smurfs and whatever.
Snorts.
And technically, you're supposed to actually license it from Disney if you want to
Okay.
use them on cakes.
Oh,
But you
true.
eat it.
Yeah, I was about to say, if they were
Is-
selling it in a grocery store.
Yeah, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, who the hell is gonna sue
Disney.
like a who's gonna sue a one-man bakery shop in Scranton,
We'll just have to
Pennsylvania?
need all
right?
the
Like,
evidence.
Exactly.
whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's gone.
And the reason we're all eating cake is because it's my birthday at midnight and Jay Berry's birthday on Saturday. So happy fucking birthday to us.
Happy fucking birthday.
So one of each, 2 generic, and then -1 for Intet the Dreamer. And then Anwar ticks up.
Oh, Jesus.
Let's see what Intet does. I'm just
He
curious.
does fun things.
It's gonna hurt.
Probably. Whenever Intet deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 3. If you do, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at it for as long as it remains, and may play that card with the pagan's life. Oh, right. Yeah.
It's pretty,
Yeah.
though.
I'm leaving the cake out, so if you decide you want more, it's there.
And then
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna tap for a blue, and then
I'll put it away
reason for
if there's
strike.
anything left before we go to bed tonight.
There you go. Put it away.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Sorry.
sorry. Yeah.
Oh,
Strike
you,
3.
which one is that one?
Reason.
Reason to
Reason to
believe.
believe. Yeah.
And you've got the believe in your graveyard, and it is look at the top card of your library. You may put it onto the battlefield if it's a creature card. Right. Well, that's gonna be fun.
Do you want me
I'll
to
keep
check out
Rhea.
front for the phones, or if it's a lost cause?
Say it again. It's a lost cause.
At
Um,
this point, it's
I'm
past
sure.
time.
Yeah, I'm sure. it'll be
Unless
fun.
it's coming by Amazon, in which case
Oh,
it will
yeah.
show up
Right
at any
now.
point.
Yeah.
The candle.
Go ahead, blow it up. Yeah, it's been on for a
And
couple
past
hours.
turn.
All right. I just want to take a quick. You know, I don't actually have the zoom to play map view. I should probably set that up. I'm just
Oops.
curious to look at your board state.
Oh.
Let's take a look at that. There we go. That's a little closer. That's a board state.
Yep.
Intet, Animar, and the Monodor.
Yeah.
All right, that's not too bad. Hey, it's not attacking me.
That wall needs to go.
Yeah, well, Clover's not gonna do anything about it.
Nope. Although, you have it set up because you're of your 3 colors, 3 or 4. Only one of them do I have protection from, so.
I'm gonna play Gutter Snape. That's
What is
probably-
that?
Whenever I cast an instant or sorcery spell, Gutter Snipe deals 2 damage to each opponent.
Great.
I don't like that.
Nobody likes the Gutter Snipe.
It's true.
It's cool art though.
Yeah.
So yeah, cast instant or sorcery. Everybody takes 2, and I'm gonna pass turn.
Could it be?
I'll bet you it's a land.
Fucking, I still get really
Just
heavy.
draw it bad, and you never have to worry. All right.
On the host.
Really, Helm of the Host.
I am done.
Is
Okay.
that the
Not
one
to anything
that
else.
it creates tokens
It's
of?
myriad, right?
It creates a token that doesn't have the legend rule applied to
Oh.
Ugh.
it. That thing.
So pretty.
I need more counters.
No, you don't.
Oh, you're gonna.
Pass turn. Did you pass?
Yes.
Yeah. Before your turn starts, I'm blowing up the fucking doubling season.
Well, fine. Be that way.
Really? Was there? Are you surprised that happened?
I'm sure it's going to get worse though. Like that's not the worst thing I can play.
Yes, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's not the worst thing you could play, but
But it
are
is
you
right now?
The question right now is: are you actually surprised somebody blew up the doubling season?
Okay, but it is my turn.
It
now.
is your turn.
Okay. Great. Okay. Did the upkeep thing, untapping thing, drawing thing. Okay.
Bless you. I wasn't really sneezed.
Then
Carrot cake.
I hate you a little bit right now.
Mhm.
I hate you a little bit right now. Not only can I not have cake, carrots are dirty sugar tubes.
Do you want a little bit of the cream cheese icing?
No, I've been eating cheesecake all week actually, because that I can definitely have.
what do I have in my
The cream cheese
deck
icing is
that
good.
could
Creme
make this
Stuff on top? It's been
awesome?
dessert for the last like 3 nights.
Oh, that is pretty cool.
Kit Rogue doesn't fly, so that's a problem.
Yep.
I'm gonna turn the air back
I
on.
don't think
There, 'cause
I
it's a
would
little
like
hot.
air.
Yeah.
You know what?
That would drive the shit out of my contacts. My
I'll
eyes.
play
I'm doing
Forest.
it on low, so if
Jeez.
it gets bad, let me know and I'll turn it off. I know. I'm you left too early, man.
My brain didn't think it should be fine since I don't have
4,
contacts.
5.
You can't have that cake. You've been eating cheesecake all week. You can't have cheesecake night either.
yeah, I know. Fair. It's a fair card.
I can make you cake.
I don't know. There's a white one that
Oh.
is fair too. It's not in that deck.
Yes, this works out. Because
But,
Kit Rogue's
no,
5, this card is 4. Yeah, I think I want to do this. And it's going to take forever.
I wonder if I could keto carrot cake. Carrots are so sugary.
Okay.
You probably could.
I probably could, but it'd be like
You'd have to add like
A
weirdo
meal.
flavor. You'd
Yeah.
have to add like do it with like rutabaga or something weird.
Yeah, you'd have to switch out the root vegetable.
Okay.
I don't wanna.
So,
I mean,
I can make a sweet
there's
potato cake.
There's
but
a
that's
difference
not
between the
I
sugar in that
am
and the sugar in the
tapping
carrot.
4.
If you put enough fiber in it.
I am
It counteracts
tapping
anything.
4 to play natural order. I'm going to sacrifice the worm I just got, which
Yeah.
is a green creature. This also happens to
Oh,
be
all
black.
right. So let's see what you're. What are you tutoring for?
I don't know.
Oh,
I
you
haven't
just
played this
you're going
deck
for
in
an
a while.
answer.
Yes. Hopefully one with reach or like. Like.
So you played Primal Order, right?
Natural.
Natural. Oh, I'm sorry.
Order.
Natural Order.
Okay. You do not have reach. Come on, answer. Be here somewhere.
Wait, there it is.
Not an answer.
Is that the one you played? Yeah, that's the one you played.
But it allows me to shuffle shit back to the top of my library.
Well,
Like
shuffle
that
your
constant
library, like the
miss.
constant miss. Yeah.
Yeah. So that might be an option. It's not going to save me from a 6/6 flyer. But
And you put it onto that battlefield, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Hey,
That
look,
does
not a bad card. So, and by the way, this is not a counterspell deck. Like it is. There's like 2 counterspells in it, and they're the flashback stuff.
Well, and the mana you had open, I wasn't too.
Well, I do have a blue open.
Oh, okay. Didn't see the blue, but
Sorry.
not relevant. Oh,
I
yes.
Burnished Heart is a fair card. It actually is really fair. I mean, it can die before anything happens. You know what I mean? You got to spend 6 mana.
Maybe, but no, if that comes in, that's not gonna work.
God damn it. Every time I look up and see Frozen Flaming, I want that cake. I'm like, yes, I will have another bite of that cake.
I'll make you a cake soon.
Somehow I knew you'd like that.
Somehow, you know, like, despite being married to me for 11 years, you figured out that I might like this cake.
One, we've only been married for 8.
Well,
Bird.
2, we've been together 11 years.
I know. I consider us being married for that 11
And the
years because we
moment we
bought a
bought a
fucking
house,
house
I know.
3 months after we got together because we're idiots.
Let me
Oh.
reread this right quick.
Because we're idiots.
And it worked out 11 years later. So.
Yeah, kind of like you.
Nope, that's my only reach card, and I'm just gonna show it because it's not gonna matter now, and I don't want to put this on the battlefield because it'd be a 0/0 and immediately die. So
I'm just gonna sit here and chuckle because I am now understanding what kind of havoc the Pramicon's gonna wreak on every game it's played in.
Part of me wishes it was in the same colors as Aminatu. That way you could just really mess with
Oh,
people's cards.
well, I mean, so make a different commander.
In 5. Yeah.
Reaper King. Horden, I mean, like, I've literally played 5-color decks where I don't give a shit who the commander is. I just
Yeah.
want the colors.
Yeah.
I'm playing
My tracks are
Titania.
What are you playing?
Titania.
Titania. I forget what she does.
Oh, when she entered. Fuck.
Do you want to
well.
play something different?
No,
All right.
because she's probably the best option.
Protector of Argoth, right?
Yep.
When she enters the battlefield, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yeah.
Oh, every time you put a land in the graveyard, you get a 5/3 elemental.
Yeah.
Nice.
She's pretty, and I like the artwork. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's one of our favorites.
Very cool. What was it? Magath Villeneuve.
I
I love saying that name.
All of her stuff is gorgeous.
is.
And then I am going to tap
And you'll
5.
know it's like this amazing use of light. Everything.
That's why we like it.
That's I'm really starting to
My
understand.
frog
Like,
horror
the
is
artists
in.
that understand the light are the best.
Yes. He is in now.
Chiaroscuro is my favorite.
So, and pass.
Chair school? What?
Chiaroscuro, the
No,
use
it's
of light
the
work,
it used to be Chiaroscuro was but the informal joke was, where are you going tonight? Chair school.
That's awful.
Land return.
That passed right over me when I was going.
Chair school.
I have the big poster. of
Sucks.
dude.
Oh, is Gitrog in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gitrog is in. Alrighty then.
I need some protection.
So, just to be clear, I took the Binding of Ixalan out of this deck.
What does that one do?
It's terrible and awful in Commander. It wasn't so bad in Standard, nobody used it. But in Commander, it is this. Oh, Ixalan's Binding?
Yes. It's an A.
Oh, thank you. Did I put it in the right place?
I don't think you deleted the I.
I can't spell Ixalan.
Well, who can?
There it is. So, you play it, and you exile target opponent's commander. It goes back to the command zone, but they cannot cast spells with the same name as that card.
Oh, that's so mean.
I did not. I took it out of this deck specifically and replaced it with
Because we're nicer than that on stream.
yeah, I literally took it out of the deck and replaced it with the O-ring.
That's
Yeah.
atrocious.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they put it in.
But effective.
Like, how do you not I mean,
Ooh.
it's thematic, right?
Yeah.
It's thematic with Ixalan, and everybody gets exiled there and whatever.
You're wrong.
That's not correct.
I think because it has to stay exiled, and because it goes.
Oh, the card is no longer exiled? Oh. Oh, well, there you go. Then I'm wrong.
Because the commander can't be exiled?
Good, then I can actually put it back in and not worry about it, and it's another O-ring for me.
Yeah.
Don't
Good to
use
know.
it as a fair card.
So.
Jay Berry's just now
Sorry,
catching up.
I don't have any other
I'm
options.
working.
So I have to attack you.
It's
Fix some
fine.
shit
You,
for us.
you have
You
to
have to
attack.
tell your
I
friends.
mean, I need to fill my hand, or not fill my hand, but just see what happens.
Eventually, you gotta kill your friends.
What happens?
It's gotta do
So,
combat damage, right?
It
He
did.
doesn't. She doesn't have reach. So.
And it does a visual. Oh, you tapped it already.
Yeah.
Got it.
So paying 2 and a blue, and then exile the top card face down. I can look at it, and then I can play it without paying its mana cost.
Please be a land.
No, and I'm just gonna play it right now. Might Beyond Reason. So 2+1/+1 counters on target creature. So Animar takes up.
Oh jeez. What fresh hell are you going to unleash upon us now? Or me, for that matter.
Huh?
I already attacked, so I'm not gonna do anything else. So, pass turn. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Untap. Upkeep, draw. That'll do. Desolate Lighthouse.
What does that do?
I'll bring it up. I can tap it for 1 colorless mana, or I can, what's the word? Fatal Saluting with it, or draw 1 to discard 1.
Oh god, maybe I should get you to get the token box, because at this point I'm going to have a 5/3 elemental on my turn and a worm. That
Done, go.
I don't
You're gonna need more places.
know the best way to tell the difference.
I'll get it. I will happily get the token box.
Thank you, kind sir. Even though you're shield dick.
Even though I'm still a dick.
Wish we had subtitles, but we tried using the subtitles
Oh,
and it
they were
crashed
bad.
the stream, and it was just a disaster.
Don't
push
set
it.
it on the meat.
That's what she said.
It just doesn't work yet.
Oh, and actually, since we're not actually using this tonight, it can move.
It's got stuff on the cord.
Y'all. There we go.
Okay.
I'll need that.
How is this?
Anybody else want me to take this in?
Angel.
Anything else? Cool.
Nope.
That's DN. Not to Elemental yet. That's a Drake. Nope.
What are you looking for?
5/3 Elemental?
Green or red? Or green or red?
Green.
I got a couple in here. Go ahead, take your turn.
I could use a worm, but worms are easy because they're 1/1s. So that I can fake with
Siege?
dice.
4/4.
Palace Siege, dragons.
What does that do?
At the beginning of my upkeep, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life.
Okay. What should you do next?
I am done.
Okay. So I have upkeep effects now.
Oh wait.
Because go ahead.
I have a Grim to Guardian out, so each opponent loses 1 life.
Because it's an enchantment.
Yes. Look, I remembered a thing.
You remembered your trigger!
One single
Aw!
thing.
Okay.
Aw, you remembered your trigger.
So
I'm very proud of you.
upkeep.
Did we take Bantus out of that?
I get a worm.
I don't think we did. I don't
And
It's a pretty
then
decent card
with
with that.
Gitrog, I have to, at the beginning of my upkeep, sacrifice a land, which means I get an elemental. We're going to put that forest there. And then I basically end up drawing 2 cards because I draw a card when that happens, and then I draw a card after upkeep. I should have untapped first.
Love Jordan.
Jordan, how's it going, man? Well, cheers. Pour yourself one and have it with us.
Okay.
Because it's my birthday at midnight.
Can't cheer with
Still
water.
can't protect against a flyer.
Hey, Ken.
No, cheering with water spell out. Can I cheer with tea?
Sure. You can cheers with whatever we tell you can do. Like, I don't
No,
know.
bad luck to cheer with water.
I did not know that. I knew it was bad luck.
I've never heard
To
that.
cheers with an empty glass.
That's true, yeah.
I am going to play an Oran Reef. That comes untapped. Val, I'm gonna need your help just murdering that wall. Because if you can murder that
I
wall,
can't.
I won't be hitting you with Gitrog because I don't think you currently have Death Touch stuff.
I do not.
So,
I need more mana.
and considering I can't block her commander with Gitrog and the other thing flies, yeah, I'm probably just gonna, yeah, this is gonna hurt a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean he's an 8/8 currently. Like, and I need to attack him, and unfortunately you are in between me and him. Like,
Does this help?
huh? No, because that's gonna make me cry.
I think you should wipe the board. I completely support with this board wipe idea.
Oh.
And you probably
I mean,
shouldn't have
two
showed that to me
creatures out.
because then.
I'm not inclined to play it.
Okay.
I am never inclined to play.
This
Board
deck,
wipes early.
yeah, this deck is not going to win by hitting anybody with a creature ever.
God, what am I gonna do? You have to kill your friend. She's got a board wipe.
It's a board wipe deck. I'm always gonna have a board wipe.
I
I'm
know.
not inclined to play it.
I lost you at. I toast you at 7-Up. We will accept your 7-Up toast.
It's not water, so you're good.
I can't attack people.
It's just sugar water.
This is water with Mio.
Yeah. I don't know.
Uh,
Cake. Rawr. Happy birthday, Jay Burry.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh,
I
God,
wish I could attack other
Cake
people.
monster. Right?
No.
You could always not attack.
No,
Yeah, you
I
just
don't
sit
think
there.
that's an option.
Right.
Not with an
I know.
8/8 Gitrog, so
Shit happens.
You could block it with this thing.
8/8 Gitrog.
If you choose not to block it, there's your Gitrog deck token.
Just because you set me up like that, I'm gonna block it. I smell Rakdos shenanigans.
Okay. And I'm done.
Okay.
Am I done? Yeah,
I'll
I'm
give you a piece of
done.
advice,
I'll
and
be
you won't be.
done.
And it's intended in the spirit in which it's given.
Sure.
Probably should put that on. Can it only attach to a legendary?
It can only be attached to a creature.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have attached it to that and gotten a second token and gotten
I
a
can't.
token.
I don't have enough mana. I've been mana host the
She
entire
spent
game.
the
5.
Palace
Oh.
Siege.
Yeah, but I mean, you could have equipped that and then you would have gotten a
Rather
token.
than playing the Palace Siege,
I could
is
have,
what he's saying.
but I didn't.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is, because then you'll start. Then you'd have 2 of these, then 3 of these, and 4 of these, and they would start doing damage to your opponents as they came
I
in as
know
a
how the
check.
card works.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Phil.
Yeah.
So, playing just a green for Champion of Ronus.
Got it.
Animar takes up.
What does that one do? I should know. I've got it.
Is it, it's got. What's
So
that?
I can exert him, and then I can put a creature card from my hand onto the battlefield.
Which is awful.
He's in my Goreclaw deck, I think. No, he's too little. He's in my work.
He's too little for Goreclaw.
Yeah, he's a 3/3.
Well, yeah, but the problem is
But
he
he's
lets
nice
you
because
drop-
then I could get that 10/10
Right, he
dinosaur
yeah.
that's 5 green.
Or the world spine worm or whatever, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
And
look at
then-
the angry lizard in the background.
I love that it's an angry lizard in the background.
I think we have a couple of those at home.
It's open
I'm
on
gonna
Nelson,
hug.
of course it is.
So, at my vet's office, because they deal with exotics,
Jay
they
Bird's
have
birthday
a
on Saturday.
poster that's like, do not kiss the lizard.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm the person.
Do not kiss the lizard.
Well, because they've
I'm
got
gonna need a photo of
salmonella.
that.
And
It's not.
some reptile people can be crazy.
We
Well,
have
I've seen
so
videos
many
of people
reptiles.
kissing like black mambas, being like, "Oh, he loves me." It's like,
It's a
no,
snake.
he doesn't.
Like
We
he
only have
tolerates you because you
one
bring it food,
snake.
maybe.
I'm,
You know.
I'm
No, I have a
attacking you again.
personable snake. They don't tolerate you when you bring them food.
Okay.
Swinging
Anyways.
with Intet again.
Yep.
Yep, and then let's see what happens.
I'm gonna have to build a Permacon deck now.
No.
Now that I see what it
That's
does,
awful.
I really am gonna have to build this deck.
Yep, I'm just gonna put this in
What is it?
Predator Ooze.
I love the
What is
Predator.
that
He's
one
my
do
favorite
again?
green card. He's in almost every green deck I play.
So here, watch. So it's indestructible, and
Oh, that's in my God's deck.
is it?
Yes.
In Indestructible Gods, right?
Does that count as casting him? Even though I didn't pay.
No.
You
No.
did not cast.
Okay. No. I did not think so.
He enters
Oh, thank you,
the
Secret Weapon.
battlefield.
We have a patron. We have a patron.
I believe.
So
A new
it's,
patron.
You may
Molto
play the
grazie.
card
Yeah.
without paying the mana cost.
Their name is
Which-
Secret Weapon.
That's on
Yeah, because
Patreon.
this I know isn't casting, but I wasn't
That's also
exactly
Secret
casting.
Weapon. on
Yes.
Patreon.
Secret Weapon for our new Patreon. I appreciate that. There's not enough talk about Monogorger Hydra. I'm a fan of the Monogorger Hydra. Monogorger Hydra.
That's a word.
It is. It sounds like a very, very specific kind of
And
street.
caster, yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Untap, upkeep, draw.
You're up, fuckface.
Ah, Jesus.
Jeez.
I'm bitter about that wall. I'm gonna find a way.
I just need some more mana to happen with me.
Draw card, discard a card.
Do you want me to check if you have mana?
I didn't.
It's not mana,
play
but
that. Sorry,
whatever
I'm
it
an
is,
idiot.
it's fine, I'm sure, because I also need creatures. Remember that thing that I have, the superstition I have about like when you break your deck down? The first 3 like playthroughs are fucking awful, and this is the first one.
Yep.
So. This is not surprising to me, and I'm fine with it. It will just be bad.
Alright, let's see. Fuck it.
Fuck it as a playstyle.
It is.
Yep.
There, Savine. Bastard.
What does he do? The flashback?
Prevent all damage that would be dealt to Savine. And whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell from your graveyard, copy it.
Great.
Did I have a reliquary tower out when I discarded earlier?
No.
Okay. I must have pulled it afterward. No,
You
I
had
started the
too
game with
small.
a reliquary
Yeah.
tower in my hand. So
So then
I
put
must have
your
discarded
Gorgon
what I
back.
shouldn't have. I was like, wait.
Put your Gorgon back in your hand.
I need an adult.
You should do whichever makes your heart happy, Patreon or Twitch. Patreon is probably preferred since it doesn't knock off every month and you have to go back and re-up it. So I would prefer if you. We would all prefer
Yeah.
if you did Patreon.
So basically, what you're saying is next time you help me deck build, I let you shuffle the deck after. Because that's okay.
Thanks for the birthday wishes, Jordan Johnson.
Thank you.
Should you Patreon or Twitch? Well, depends on what perks you want.
That's true. You don't get any perks for Twitch, just our
Yeah.
lovely shining faces.
Yeah.
On Patreon, there will be perks, and there are perks. We actually have a
Yes.
bunch of fun signed cards.
We do.
Ugh, I need
There
mana.
could possibly be a murder.
And maybe-
Or
An Alan
or-
Williams signed card? Ooh, I don't know.
Yes.
Or a Todd Lockwood signed card.
Or a Todd
Ah.
Lockwood signed card? Yeah.
Boob window.
With a boob window.
Oh, window.
Boob
Wait. What's the
Tit window.
tit window?
Angel of Despair.
Angel
I was
Despair.
looking through some like goth clothing site, and it was just tit window, tit window, tit window.
Yeah.
It was like the whole thing. The whole thing.
Because apparently goths just want tit windows.
Apparently.
Because, other people wouldn't like those.
I mean, I've got jewelry in my fucking chest for a reason. It's coming out. It's not happy. I need mana.
I have jewelry in my chest, and it's coming out.
Yep.
I'm going to eat my cake and shut up.
Liliana.
Thank you, Justin. Or Jordan. Sorry. J words. Plus, I'm about to make my second bourbon drink. Oh, Liliana,
also,
heretical healer?
Everybody should lose 2 life.
Oh, right. Remember
Oh,
your
great.
triggers.
I'm not good at this. I'm also great at dropping my phone.
You got it.
I know some people, if they have upkeep triggers, they'll like put a die on top of their deck.
That's
That
what Jay
way
was telling me earlier.
Oh, yeah.
they can't draw without.
Yeah, you can't draw without remembering.
Yeah, he was telling me
actually a
that,
really
and I
good
was like, I'll straight up still forget. I'd be like, why the fuck is this die in there? Like, literally, this is the conversation we
idea.
had.
So
Like,
here's the
before dinner.
granite die
Are you done?
to remind you to for your
Okay.
triggers.
Okay, so I should have lost 2 life rather than doing
I'm
more
going to bring
stuff.
up Liliana Heretical.
So, upkeep stuff. I get a worm. Surprise worm. I have to murder a land.
You know our YouTube link's just coming to GG,
So,
right?
I'm gonna murder a
It
swamp.
goes right to the channel. No, I can change it. Is it just cover?
That gives me
It just is easier to
another
glance.
elemental. And then I'm gonna draw my 2 cards.
That's why I made everything,
Untap as well.
Yeah, see, that's
Cross-
the actual link. YouTube.com/channel/that.
No one's gonna type that in.
What's that?
You can't click on it. No one's gonna type it in.
Yeah.
If you could click directly, then yeah.
That would have been more interesting.
Why don't I just take the
earlier.
YouTube one off then? Like
Well, it
those.
does us a favor if people watch here.
True.
Sigh.
I'm just gonna do that then.
Put in Instagram.
Is that a thing? People actually use it?
Nope.
We can update it later. Oh, that didn't like that.
Oh.
I am tapping a command tower for a relic of
I did break it.
Progenitus.
Thank you.
Did you just play Progenitus?
No.
Relic.
The relic of him.
Oh.
Yes. Not that this is gonna matter for me quite right now, but I'm gonna do a thing.
Whatever.
Yeah, the problem is it was in a different... Go ahead, just take your turn, I'll fix it. Oh, and by the way, I pulled that card up because Val played it.
Yes.
I am
And it
also
flips
going to
into
play
this ridiculousness.
the Heart of the Expedition.
One of my favorite Liliana arts.
Yes. And again, I will repeat.
Oh, she needs something to die.
Every
right?
time Liliana's drawn, it looks more and more like Cynthia. Because, you know, impress your art director.
The one from War looks a lot like the Liliana cosplayer.
Fine. And
Say that
just
again?
because-
The Liliana from War looks almost identical to Tarmocat.
Oh, yeah.
We gotta see her.
I actually met her at, we all met her at Gen Con because she was doing the...
She was doing the modeling for the painting the cards. Right?
Yeah.
I am going to tap 3 and play a Tiling Tree Folk, and I get to return 2 lands to my hand. Haven't played land per
that's
turn.
broke as shit now.
I'm going to play
I don't know how to fix it until after we're done.
Forest for my turn.
Technology.
And then I am
Alright,
going
well,
to...
okay, hold on. Like, what the shit is all that craziness going on
She's
over
doing
there?
a lot, but I don't know
I'm
what's
also
actually
going to
happening.
tap this, and I can put a counter on things that entered.
Yeah, there's just a lot of creatures going on.
Yeah. So, and I have 2 forests open and cards on hand.
Hey, Matthew.
Okay.
Good.
So, since you guys were talking,
Yes.
I played this, which
Relic,
allows
yeah.
me
You
to
only hit me.
exile.
Is anything happening to me right now?
Yes.
Not yet.
It's gonna
Oh,
happen.
it's gonna happen.
Because I forgot we were going this way.
Yeah. Which again, I wish kind of
Well, I just wanted to see that
stuff
play, Matt.
would die.
Dragon Gem.
Huh?
I
Thanks,
also
Dragon
played
Gem.
this enchantment, which would have been better earlier because I don't really need the basic lands, but in case...
It's never bad to have more basic
Yeah.
lands in play.
Oh wait, and a land entered the battlefield, so I get a quest counter. Okay.
Alright, I gotta put on the cool hat. We need to pause for a moment
What
to
are we
personally thank Dragon Gem.
Thank you very much,
for
Dragon Gem.
supporting our Patreon at the $5 level.
Woo!
Which
Thank you,
means
Dragon Gem.
that you are automatically entered into our raffle for the next, for the first card we're going to be raffling away, a signed card or artist proof from a MTG artist who we met probably maybe this weekend at Dragon Con. If you want to
They're all
sleuth out who
awesome.
might that be, there were a lot of them. Just saying.
There were clues. Like us telling you earlier that's what it was going to be.
There were a lot more that we didn't mention.
There were.
And one of them maybe named Elmore. Anyway.
looking for?
Yeah.
I have no idea how to read the subtitles because I don't have them turned
Oh,
on.
they were bad.
Yeah, if you're watching subtitles through Twitch, and you can turn them on through Twitch, and Twitch has a machine learning thing.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Awful.
So if you have them turned on through Twitch, they're universally
Especially
terrible
with the
so
group,
far.
It's
A wild
terrible.
Jayberry appears.
Microsoft actually has it down. If you turn on captioning in Skype, it'll caption real time.
But we don't have that turned on right now.
No, we don't have it. They've got it turned on through Twitch, not through OBS. So they've got Twitch has a service, so we're streaming to Twitch, and then Twitch's servers are adding
Well,
captions.
Oh god,
'Cause
I
before we
hate
could turn
having
it
to
on.
do
Yeah.
this, but I guess it lets us go to another game faster, and you have to kill your friends in Magic.
Exactly.
Sorry. But yeah. So 6/4, 6/4, 8/8.
Okay. Does anything fly?
Nope. None of it flies. It's all ground. Because she's beating me in the face with a 6/6, and until
Yeah.
something
It's
gives.
a
Can I see
light
those two?
smack.
These two?
No.
Or Get Rug?
Get out.
Yeah. I have something pumping them, is why they're bigger. Gitrog is both colors, so he gets +2/+2, but the other ones get +1/+1 because they're green.
I have to make a Pramicon deck. I'm watching the insanity that's causing this game.
I was debating picking up that precon just for the
get
one
Rogan,
card,
yes,
and I realized that that's a very poor financial decision.
Just buy the card.
So that is 12 damage.
Okay.
How much
But
was
not Commander.
No.
Because
I
she
thought
blocked
she blocked
Kit Rock
it.
again.
Got it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna
we done?
have these guys hang back here. Yeah, done. Done. Although, do I want Liliana out of your graveyard? I'm
We
not
are
kicking
all looking
someone
for the
while
new
they're
set.
down. Go. Like, that just feels mean. Like, it's like, I killed your Liliana. Bam.
Oops.
Goodbye. Although, what's in yours? Do you get flashback?
Yeah,
With your commander?
the entire deck is flashback, and I haven't drawn a single flashback card yet.
Then never mind.
There's
I don't
like
care about
22
your-
cards in the deck with flashback.
Although I could get rid of this one. You know what? I'm getting rid of your belief since you're gonna hit me in the head anyway. Goodbye. It is exiled. No card for you.
No free card, no free top card in your library for you.
Yeah. Although
Oh
that's,
no, I already get it.
yeah, exactly. By hitting me in the face.
Right. All right.
I'll do this.
Did you see that? You missed that. The stream didn't miss that, but you guys did. I picked it up like this, and I went to bite it, and it just plopped right off.
I accidentally took a bite of just cream cheese earlier. I definitely thought there was cake underneath it.
Because, you know.
Okay.
Oh, that was most of that bite. Oh, good.
5.
But my teeth now hurt.
Oh, yeah.
And then 2 green to bring out Nissa Genesis Mage.
Oh, God.
Oh, boy.
So she comes in with 5.
What does she do?
Mostly just untapped lands.
Imagine that.
Ooh, that's
Or it gives a
pretty.
target creature +5/+5.
I mean, that too.
Or look at the top 10 cards of your library. You may put any number of creature or land cards onto the battlefield.
Nice.
Yeah, no.
I feel like Goreclaw needs that.
And she's already at 7, I'm assuming.
Yeah. She's gonna be.
Yeah. So 2 more turns before that thing goes insane.
Yep. Or if I draw any of my proliferate cards.
Right.
Yeah, so I'll just take her to 7 to untap 1 creature and 2 lands. Let's untap Fan Tower and Island.
Alrighty then. That's kind of crazy.
And then... Sure. Not... Yes, so swinging with Intet again. Sorry.
No worries.
And then
I'm astounded you haven't
Dang.
drawn any of the fogs or any of the reachy things.
Nope.
2 and a blue.
It's this awful confluence of awfulness.
Please.
That look was priceless.
That's just gonna hang out over there.
So that it stays
It
exiled.
stays exiled, and then
And
I
if
can...
Intet goes away, it stays exiled,
Yes.
right? Am I up?
Yes.
Alright.
By the way, I would have played your Planeswalker after the fact because then you could untap your 6/6 flyer.
I was debating that, but then I didn't have the mana order to be able to do it. I had to untap.
Ah, I see
the
what
land.
you're
Yeah,
saying.
because I was like, oh, and no, I can't.
Not much updating
I'm
things.
surprisingly, I have not pulled any of my land ramp at all.
Where I got my land ramp, but none of my fogs to protect me from a 6/6 flyer.
I mean, I think you saw one of your fogs.
Yes,
Just went-
I saw several of my fogs.
Just go right past her.
Yeah.
Good times.
I'm gonna Savine's Reclamation, and Savine's Reclamation is gonna put that back in play.
Would you like to put the
What
cheese
was it?
near my face?
Sure. The Seal of Cleansing, destroy target artifact or enchantment.
Would you like to scoop me in?
I will happily scoot you in. You ready?
Yep.
Off we go.
Thank you. Oh, so close.
You want the cheese in your face?
I want the cheese near my face. Yes.
Cheese is near your
Let's do
face.
that.
Alright, I've got that in play. I don't know, fuck it.
Pocket is a playstyle.
Yeah. Especially for a Spellslinger deck, so.
Yep. I'm going to play this from my graveyard, so it's going to get doubled. And I will put a Burnished Heart and a Blind Obedience back in play.
No.
Oh, fuck!
No.
It's been a game.
And by the way, everybody take 6 damage because I played 3 instants. Or 3 sorceries.
Great. This is going to be a fast game one way or another.
I'm fine with it. Starting a new game?
We're getting there.
Come here, cheese.
Let's see. They were not cast, right?
Wait a second.
Cast? Yeah, no.
So, how much life do we get back, or?
None.
You said you played how many instants? Is it play or
2.
cast?
I played this,
Okay.
and then I played it from my graveyard and doubled it. So this one, that one, the doubled. 2, 4, 6. And this is exiled now, since I flashed it back.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There's cheese on my card.
I wonder how I got there.
In true me fashion, there's cheese on my card. Who'd thought? Everybody lose 2 life.
Yup. I
Now
forgot
might
last time,
be the
so
time for the board raid.
37.
What?
Now might be the time for the board raid. Just putting it out there.
I'm happy
Or
to have.
not.
I am perfectly happy to have a board wipe.
I don't want it, but I have enough mana to recover Gitrog.
I'm really digging on Pramicon.
Jesus. I need mana. I have 6.
You have 6, so either.
What is Purple's other ability? Or is it just the attacking thing?
It's
That's
the
it.
attacking.
It's both
thing.
flying and defender. It's a
Okay.
1/5 flying defender. When it enters the battlefield, choose left or right. Each player may only attack
Okay.
the nearest person on that side.
Done.
I am sorry in advance for going to have to force the conversation.
Yeah, if you kill Val, then I'm the person on your left.
Yes.
Or on your right.
Can you give me more thingies?
What do you need?
Yeah, there we go. Because
What's that?
I
upkeep.
could have board wipe, but I don't.
Why
I
didn't
think
you
I care
worm?
at this point because this game's a shit show.
I need more
You
elementals.
could
about this
absolutely
has
pull this
been
out.
fun for me.
How am I missing an elemental? You gave me 3. I only have 2
So-
here.
Tough later.
Hmm?
I don't want to be mansplaining.
You're not. Someone taught me how to play Magic.
So in that deck, until you get the mana doublers, you need to wipe the board as often as possible early game, because you don't have enough mana to do all the really cool big black things. So
I've been bugged from
like this is ridiculous.
second turn.
If I had a board wipe like that, why do it just to get rid of that ridiculousness?
I'm just sending it all your
Yeah.
way after I die.
Yeah.
What's that?
I'm just sending it all your way after I die.
Well, yeah, but then I just block with Parmicon and reanimate it,
Who else?
and then choose the other way. But then again, that's ridiculousness
Yeah. Yeah.
Have at it.
too. All right,
Fine,
what you doing there, NPC? Question. Oh, Jay Berry's asking you a question.
Okay.
How about the new set?
Oh yeah. Well, I would assume you could probably only play it as a sorcery. You can't play it as an instant.
Well, right, but you can just do it any time while that creature is still out.
No. So you can only play the sorcery part from your hand.
Oh, I thought it was if it was in play, you could play the sorcery
No,
card.
so-
So
and-
it's either.
Yeah, and then it goes into exile, and then you can play the creature from exile.
Oh,
or
that's-
you can play just the creature from your hand. It's weird. It's kind of complicated.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
They were trying to figure out how to make that work, and they came up with some convoluted shit to make that work.
Yeah.
So I need another counter, please.
How you going?
Because I'm giving the elemental that came in another counter. And then I've tapped 3, which I doubt you're going to let this survive, but hate to force
Me?
hands here. Beastmaster's Ascension.
Well, let's. I'm certainly gonna let it live for 1 attack.
Okay.
Right? Why wouldn't I?
Okay, Val. Sorry. Okay.
Do you have 7 things to
Just
attack
letting
with?
it happen.
What?
I'm just letting it happen.
Yeah,
You are.
because she's gonna clobber me pretty good. Okay. What the hell do I want to leave back? I'll leave back this green creature.
Like
so
at this point in the game, if I don't have enough mana to even put my commander, like, what's the fucking point?
Okay.
Well,
I
you
have
do
a lot
next
of
turn.
small-ish creatures, and
No, we
then
don't.
Gotcha.
2 6/6s right
This
now.
is gonna be
I don't
an 8/8. This
Well,
is
now you
going
have 2,
to
4,
be,
6, 8, 10, 12.
Oh, well, that's why I played that, but
13,
I didn't expect
yeah.
to live through the next
This
turn,
is
so whatever.
So, 8/8 plus 12.
Do you
That's
remember
20.
the game where Blues
That's
hook up guy game we played? We were playing on the thing.
So I think that.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
actually, I'm
Game
gonna
it.
keep this
yeah.
behind.
So in that game, I was playing Chainer. I was at 2 life for most of the game.
Life doesn't mean shit in Magic.
Right, like I had that board state, and just wiping the board when I could, trying to whatever.
It depends on what you pull.
Okay, I am attacking you
If I can't play
with
it, so it doesn't matter.
26
Next turn.
points of damage.
She's at 26,
I'm done.
and that doesn't. You didn't trigger the Beastmaster.
Actually, you know what?
How many creatures attacked?
How many do I need to attack?
7, right?
You know what? Fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How many creatures do you have
I
out?
did not take Conjure out.
1, 2, 3.
You also still have the squirrels.
So you know it's in this deck now?
Yeah, I do. So. Fine.
Yeah.
Beastmasters is off, so it's a lot of damage.
All right, you're dead.
It doesn't even have. I mean, 26 is the gas damage.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
she
I
wanted to
know.
attack with enough to kill you,
Yeah.
so that the Beastmaster's triggers.
Okay. Creatures you control. Great, my squirrels are ginormous then.
Your squirrels are as big as my dragon.
Yep, but they don't fly.
But they don't fly.
Okay. I wish they did.
Pass turn.
Yes. Pass turn, sorry.
Did you did your
Oh,
your
they're-
land silly thingy-majigger this turn?
What?
Discard and draw extra.
Yeah, that happens at my upkeep.
Gotcha.
You know, the one I've been announcing what I actually do?
I'm sorry, what?
Exactly.
Basically,
All right, cards in
basically
hand.
that sums up how we play.
4
Enough.
Clover cards in hand,
5.
and 1 in exile.
Yeah.
And you're pulling all this out on 6 land.
Just all.
Yeah. But her commander's at 5 currently.
Yes.
So, like,
He's not even that
basically, yeah.
Because I've gotten him to like 20 something before. So we're gonna tap 1, 2, 3,
I've got none of
4,
my,
5,
like, destroy
6,
stuff either.
7
Some of the fox just up past you right back.
to take up Nissa to
Note
9.
to yourself, need more reach.
This is a 9.
To untap 2. To tap another one.
4.
And untap the creature. 4 Eldrazi Conscription
Which
on
does...
Animar. Ooh. Animar or Intet?
Intet.
Intet, yeah. Yeah.
He wants that so you can kill me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then he has to deal with you.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, on
Which,
Intet. So
yeah.
Intet is now a 16/16 with Trample and Annihilator 2.
So when Intet attacks, you sack 2 permanents. Okay.
And then
I'm gonna
Squirrels
die.
for
It
the
doesn't
squirrels.
matter. I'm at
Gotcha.
11. Like...
and then I'm going to play the card that Intet exiled last time,
Comes in tapped.
which is a sorcery.
Oh, never mind.
Put X +1/+1 counters on target creature where X is that creature's power. So 6 +1/+1 counters on Animar
Oh, no. Animar's power with the thing on it.
is 6.
Oh, I thought you put the conscription on
Yeah.
thingy.
So that ticks him up also to a 16. If I can find 11 on here.
Yeah.
She's already been activated.
Let's see. Would you let me take a good swing at him without killing me? Although if he has a board wipe, never mind. Just
I was
kill
gonna
me.
say-
Just to do it. Because if he has a board wipe, then we're
Then-
both screwed. So
Yep. So, yeah, I'll swing at you for 16.
Are you at 16? Or
I'm at 11.
Yeah, you're dead.
So
All right, so let's see what I get to do on my turn. Are you done?
Yes.
That's the thing. What's your life total?
29.
okay. Borrowed elemental tokens. I don't even know where the other one went. Oh, wait a second. Is this it? Yeah, that was it. I'm like, Val doesn't have a green beast. Like,
Burnished Heart.
Not a current.
Alright. It's gonna be a thing. It's gonna be a thing. We'll see what happens.
yeah.
It's exciting to see.
Yeah.
Mountain.
So that's funny. Putrefy was 2 cards down.
Island.
That
So
would have
close to
been
getting rid
useful.
of.
Right.
It happens.
Yep.
Like, it's just showing me that I might need more. Well, but I have fog, so it's hard. Like, I have a lot of strong cards in here. I'm not sure I want to go through and figure out a bunch of reach ones.
Yeah.
When they won't play as well
Just generally.
with what I have.
It wouldn't have been that bad if I could have attacked anybody except
Yeah,
for you.
yeah.
It would have spread it out a little bit.
Well, and that's where Val ended up stuck. She had to.
How big's the
take
champion
the
awareness?
frog
3?
order.
Yeah, he's only
Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do 3 points of damage to Nissa so that thing doesn't go nutty.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the one card.
And I'm gonna blind obedience it. You lose 1, I gain 1.
Okay.
Her one card has
Pass turn.
protection for black, not everything.
Yeah, just
Oh
just
wait,
the
and
commander.
take
Yeah.
2 because I cast a sorcery for
Okay.
an instant.
Although, your destroy everything
And-
still
It
doesn't
gets it
target
because it
because-
doesn't target it.
Yeah.
And
He's actually not board wipe safe.
no,
Yeah.
I'm gonna sack that to kill the Eldrazi conscription.
Oh.
And now you're up.
Wait, doesn't she lose life for you casting thing? Oh, that
I didn't-
wasn't
yeah,
a
it was an
cast.
int- yeah.
Never mind. It's like, I'm so confused. There are things happening, and stuff, and things. Although,
Stuff
get
and
wrong.
things.
I just bought boxes that
This is
say
gonna be
stuff and things
ridiculous.
on them.
Stuff and things.
Stuff and things. What was that?
I just bought boxes that say stuff and things on them.
Yeah. Nice.
Let's
Yeah,
see what
that
happens.
wall definitely changes.
The nature of everything.
Yeah.
When you can control the flow of combat,
It's not fun.
How many creatures do you have?
3.
And what's their toughness?
Well, Savina's immune to all damage.
Okay.
Gutter Snipe's a 2/2, and the wall's a 1/5.
Okay.
And flying. So.
Nah, I do one of those.
Squirrels are so cute.
So 2
I
turns
do
at
one of
least.
those.
No, it's actually from like 15 years ago.
Oh.
They reprinted it in.
So just a blue for Thrumming Bird. It comes in tapped.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
right,
12.
because blind obedience.
Yep.
So my tokens would have come in tapped, but it doesn't matter.
Well, I
died
didn't
anyway.
have this until last turn.
Yeah,
I-
but still, I played after you.
But they didn't have
So-
haste, so.
Yes, but they would have been blockers. Like, I held the one black.
Oh,
so,
gotcha.
like, if it had mattered,
If it had
and there
mattered.
wasn't a flyer.
Had it mattered.
Yes.
Rankle is worded awkwardly. I don't know what Rankle is.
It's
New?
yeah. So he's Rankle isn't as worded as awkwardly as the one with the graveyard interaction, because instead of just saying enter and leave the graveyard, they phrased it like super complicated.
Because wizards.
Because, yeah. Well,
Oh,
because.
wait, is that the weird. Never mind. I have.
Do you remember what the name of that one is? The graveyard interaction one? Or we
Oh.
should go Rankle.
Yeah. Is it Rankle because it's mono black?
Rankle,
Yeah.
master of pranks. I love that. That's ridiculous.
Oh.
Fairy Rogue, imagine that. Flying haste, deals combat damage. Choose any number. Oh, that's gonna be fun. Oh, that's gonna be a fun card.
I don't. Yeah, I don't under. What does it mean by any number?
You can choose all 3 of them, 2 of them, 1 of them,
yeah.
or choose any.
Because it's saying each player, in certain cases,
That's you.
you're not going to want to.
I happily will discard in a mono black deck.
I know, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, you know, if you were down to your last card that you didn't want to discard, you're not going to pick that option.
Yeah.
You know what? We're playing a fuck it game, so
Fuck it.
let's do
Fuck
it.
Do it.
It's at that
Fuck it
point.
all.
2 and 2 red. chain reaction.
Yep.
X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. So 1.
Prismatic damage.
2,
I
3,
prevent
4, 5,
all
6,
damage
7.
that will be dealt by red sources this turn.
Ah!
And take 2 damage because I cast an instant or sorcery.
Awful.
Would you like me to play my Petro deck next?
But that does
It's
kill
not
these
like my
guys.
dick.
No, it's all prevented.
Oh,
Not to mine.
Not just
Get
yours.
wrong deck.
It does no damage this turn. So it's.
That's fast.
I like
Let me
that.
bring it up. Prismatic Strands. Let me pull it up.
What does it do?
He basically
Oh,
effectively
yeah.
just counterspelled my
That card.
yeah, which I'm okay with.
There's the old one. Here's the, let's see, the new Commander version. There it is. There's the one I played.
It's so pretty.
It is.
So prevent all damage that sources of the color of your choice would deal this turn. So all red is prevented this turn.
Oh, well, I'm gonna tick her up.
Yep.
But you didn't attack, so.
Yep.
But Intet is red, and Animar's red.
Oh, right. Never mind.
Yep. So just.
Do you have anything awesome in your hand?
Probably.
So you can exert your jackal?
For once? No.
Oh, no.
I know.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to be highly amused if I win this game by flashing back at Devil's Play twice. What's your life total?
25.
So I need at least 13 mana.
What's,
I don't think I have it.
what's
Yeah,
the
I was
red
about to
creature?
say, you don't have 13. I
3,
can see from here.
4, 5,
What's
6.
the red creature again?
9. I got 11.
The
The red, it's the
goblin.
gutter snipe, the one that does 2 damage when I play an instant or sorcery.
The one that's picking away at your life.
Yeah.
Petra. This deck is not as good as Givrog, but practice.
No, so I'm just taking her up to untap, and then I'll also untap Thornbird.
Practice.
And that's it.
Alright, let's see. Do I get land? Come on, give me land. It'll help. It does. Arcane Lighthouse. Alright, so I need to keep 3. Oh, wait, no. I don't need to keep 3. I can flash that back for nothing. So, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Although I reserve the right to change my
Minus
mind.
3
Yeah. I don't know.
is 9, right? Take 18, 19, 20, 20. Take 22. So I'm literally Devil's playing, and then 2 for the gutter snipe, 2 for the copy.
Yep. So that kills me.
Woohoo! That's ridiculous.
Nice.
Nice.
And then I tap that to flash that back to do 2 more damage.
Birthday win.
Birthday win! Huzzah! So that deck is ridiculous.
This one?
Yeah.
I like it.
It's fun. I mean, it's just big. It's just beaters.
Yeah. It
And
was.
Nissa's scary as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like reveal 10 and put him in play?
I've
Yeah.
only been able to do it once, but it was so much
no.
fun.
Yeah, I like the new artwork a lot.
Which
The-
Nissa?
for the new set.
Once again, it's an intro deck Nissa.
Nissa's a weed.
Which Nissa was it?
Genesis Mage.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, I
I
had
was
that one.
snapping a
I don't
photo
have it
because
in
I'll
my
never
hand.
remember.
So my question to Clover is, what
Yes.
time do you turn into a pumpkin? Because I don't want to suck you into another one.
It depends. What time is it now?
It is 10:30.
It took, what, an hour and a half for that one?
Yep, and that was a pretty quick one.
Yeah.
It's usually about 2 hours for us.
It's anywhere from 2 to 4.
Well, it depends on what
I
people
was
play.
like, if it runs 2 hours, that's totally fine. If it runs 4 hours, I'm going to be scooping at sorcery speed to go up.
Generally, the next one takes us to
Midnight-ish.
Okay, that's
Like midnight 30.
I already told my
Midnight
boss I'm
30's
coming in
1:30.
late, so.
Alright. Well, who is texting me? Alright, are you going to play Hethoni again?
I don't know.
I'm going to try another one of the new ones. I will not play the vampire. I'm going to play...
Do people not like the vampire?
Well, she bought it, and she wants to probably test hers before
Okay.
we all just beat
No,
on
I think
people
we're
with
just
it.
gonna break it apart.
Oh, well. The vampire one's fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it's super... much like Edgar, it's just aggro.
Yeah. Because I turned, because I have the vampire one, I just turned it into aristocrats with Teysa and Judith.
Yeah. Like,
And I
because we
haven't
needed
played it
another
yet.
aristocrat. Like,
Yeah.
there's just so many aristocrats now.
I didn't have any. I really just wanted to play Teysa and Judith together.
And the black-white one, like, in Edgar. So you can... Edgar,
Yeah.
if you really don't want to go aggro with it, Edgar could be just super aristocrats.
I have a 60 card black white vampire that I will probably turn into commander because I have the Sorin deck and
Gotcha.
like this other Sorin planeswalker.
You know,
and...
I should do this one now before the Mets completely go away.
Jeez.
I'm gonna play Kadena.
Which one is that?
The manifest morph.
Oh,
like,
yes.
Because once the Mets are there's no way I'm gonna remember what the hell's under each of those cards.
You'll be
Surprised I didn't
looking.
look
I was like, I couldn't remember it
Chamberlain?
regularly. So.
What time do you have to get up tomorrow? Are you good to flip in at midnight?
Yeah, I probably could.
Okay. Let me.
BRB.
It is bourbon stream right now. Does anybody want anything from the kitchen?
I'm good. I have no idea what deck I want to play next.
I have no idea. I did leave the ape snake in here.
Yes.
Fucking ape snake. And wait, the ridiculous Frank Frazetta backers, the Vampirella Frank Frazetta backers. Boobarella? Yes, Boobarella. God, they really are. I won't get up to get my bourbon quite yet, because then that would leave NPC alone at the table. Ah, screw it. She's been alone at the table before.
Whatever
What
will
are you
I
making?
do with myself?
So should I do enchantments or +1/+1 counters?
If the enchantments are Estrid, fuck you. No,
Yes.
do it. It'd be interesting to see how another Estrid deck plays.
I mean, I haven't. At least I don't think I've changed this so much.
I've got an Estra deck that I've not changed much either.
I have a habit of buying a lot of decks, messing with them, and then very rarely playing.
Oh,
So.
yeah. Well, this deck grew out of... What decks did it grow out of? Actually, none. Like, I just had a lot of cycling cards.
Okay.
So, it's Hapetra with cycling, which doesn't make sense because most people are like, cycling's blue. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm weird. I'm okay with that. This is why it's probably not going to be a strong deck. But
Well, I came in here to make a drink.
should be fun, right?
Exactly. I realized because I was going through all my decks, I was like, which ones do I want to bring?
I literally came in here to make
And I have a Kalia deck, which was my favorite, but I haven't played it in probably 2 years because it was so unpopular.
Is this the giant?
No, Angels,
Oh,
Demons,
yeah.
and Dragons for
Oh.
free.
Yeah.
And going through, I was like, oh man, I haven't changed this in years. I was not very great when I built this deck. I could probably make it a lot better, but it's not the
That's
nicest
everyone
deck to
will
play.
murder you.
Yeah, yeah. Especially since the amount of gives my stuff indestructible I have in that deck.
I have a gods deck that's indestructible, but it's kind of broken because half the gods don't go off.
Oh, yeah.
But it does weird things. I like weird. Like, I've got a stuffy doll with the, like, paint thing.
Oh my god.
So, like, put pariah on the stuffy doll, and it's like, yes, come at me. I will
My
block with my stuffy doll.
when I was I don't want to say first learning, but like my
for ice
first
cream
deck I
sundae
ever
eating.
bought was Core 7. It was one of the intro decks, and it was Chomana Revolutionary, and so he was indestructible, and then you put Pariah on him and just be like, yeah, you can keep attacking me, nothing's going to happen.
Yep. Except you're gonna get damaged.
Yeah.
Because that's what pariah does.
What does?
No, it wasn't Pariah on him, it was pacifism.
Putting-
It was pacifism on him.
Oh, no, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Putting pariah on stuffy doll. Which is in my god's deck.
I actually have that in Runetail.
Like,
I don't play Runetail real often because you guys hate it.
I have a Runetail deck that I don't play that often.
Well, it's ridiculous. Damn, that new Angel they just came out with.
Which one?
It turns into like a 5/5 immediately when you play it with lifelink
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
because it's a 3 casting cost Angel, and then if you have more than 30 life.
Yep.
All right. All right. So let's see. Let's go through the commanders.
To need
I need some snakes.
my tokens.
All right. So,
Oh wait, they're definitely not 5'4" snakes though. Like,
Those are big snakes.
yeah, like.
All right. So hey Matthew. Go. Life is more important than we are.
Actually, where's the
See you. There's one upstairs, one downstairs. Here, I'll point the way.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
We're gonna leave DM.
You're gonna leave DM alone, but I'll go through the commanders. What are you playing?
Estrid.
Astrid,
Petra.
Petra. All right. So
Okay.
while I am alone on this, the ladies left me alone on the stream. No. So I'm gonna play Kadena because why not? It's new. I tweaked it a little bit. Off we go. Clover is going to play Estrid. That fucking thing. And NPC is going to play Hapetra. Oh god, -1/-1 counters. I must have spelled that wrong. H-A-P-A-T. Yeah? Yeah. Ah, look at that. Spelled it right. I love the art in that, too. Who is it? Tyler Jacobson. Thank you, Tyler. That's gorgeous. All right, so... Val, what are you playing? Is our
New
Gorgon
Watchers.
friend visiting us again?
Do we have some new watchers? New guys watching?
There's other folks watching.
Okay.
So yeah.
It's weird being in 2 cams.
Well, you are straddling the cams.
I should look
There's
at the camera, but I'm
joke
also
there.
reading the comments.
That's a different kind of stream though. You are straddling the cams.
Pay me money.
Jay-Bray, clip that
Joel
shit.
for this shit.
I could.
Join the
Do I
fucking club.
want to?
Join the, not the camera straddling club.
The being too old for everything
Being
club.
too old for this shit club. Old
I,
man yells at sky.
I just steal the energy of the youth.
Huh?
That would be you.
Oh, wait.
Alright.
Isn't that your boyfriend?
Good night, Ina.
I steal his youth every day.
Good night, man. We will see you tomorrow.
He's asking me why I like
To
to
throw
The
things.
day after
No.
tomorrow.
Day after tomorrow. Sorry.
Sort of. It's still not tomorrow. I mean, tomorrow is your birthday.
It'll be my birthday in an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Woo!
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 My water.
I want everybody to have the look just go.
Yeah.
Woo.
All right. In the meantime,
Have a sad
I
little
have
hooray.
a present for Val from
Ooh.
Dragon Con. Let me
Oh.
go get it. We can
Oh.
show everyone on the stream while we're waiting, getting
I guess
set
I'll
up,
sit
and
down.
What is your present for
doing stuff.
Val?
Go sit down, and I'll get your present. I'm excited.
What are you playing, by the way?
Oh my fucking god, me?
Why are you grabbing my face?
Because that
It's grabbing
it's grabbing your
face.
face
o'clock?
clock.
It's grabbing face o'clock, apparently.
Yes.
Wow, pink really pops on the stream.
Yeah.
Like, that's nutty.
Uh,
That's awesome.
I did not actually touch her face. Oh.
Are you ready?
now? I'm scared. Yeah.
Oh,
not
God,
scared.
really, I'm inviting now. Face
I'm
touching, apparently.
ready.
Oh shit.
What are you playing?
Oh shit.
Yay!
You got.
Oh, wait,
You
look.
got a foil signed murder from
Yeah.
artist Alan Williams, who is at Dragon Con.
That's sexy.
Beautiful.
We all know that the murders are my favorite.
I am never sad to
And
draw a
we
fucking
will-
kill that thing card.
And we will we'll tell you the stories that cannot be shared
Oh, shit.
off the stream.
Con stories? Never.
Con stories.
Con stories.
Off the stream.
All right, what are you playing? Pick it. You go first too, since house rule. You died first.
Wait, is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Shit, I guess I'm just playing Hypothea
I
then.
guess you're just playing Head again. Would you like me to shuffle that?
I mean, I did, but yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Since you know. Wait, just wait for it. Right? You ready? Do it this way. Come on, put your hand up on top of mine.
Yeah. To show.
I can't turn that way. I can't turn
Oh
that
my
way.
God, do that. That's why.
Oh my
Because
goodness.
it's very difficult for little hands to shuffle.
Very.
Hey, relax, man. How are you? Long
Shitty,
time no see.
Crampy EDS hands.
Aw. See?
It's my
even-
hands
It's
might
not
be
even that
bigger
my
than
hands are
yours,
small.
yeah.
It's my hands.
Yeah, and with
are
Clover
cramping.
tonight, I am no longer in like the land of the Lilliputians.
You are though.
Hobbit.
Her hands are so little. Mine are bigger.
Aw.
Which is funny because I don't have little hands.
Yeah, like.
Small hands.
Hey,
It's
y'all
not that
got
they're
hands
small;
to
it's that
me.
they cramp all the time.
No, I
What do
mean.
you? Never mind.
It's the EDS. Cramp, cramp, cramp.
Thank you.
Yup. I should probably shuffle these.
Have the second biggest hand.
You do not. You have the third biggest hands in the house, though.
That's true.
You giant.
Because, you know, cave girl's almost 6 feet tall. so.
Although my nails, I bet, are the natural longest.
The natural
no,
bit.
no. I've got 3.
3 of them are natural
I've got 2.
3 of them are natural claws.
I've got 2.
I'm
natural
impressed.
claws.
Well, I've broken all the other ones.
Relax, man. The
new
new leaf clover is Clover.
This one
She'll
is
be
also
joining us from
broken
time to
right here,
time.
and it feels great.
We met her at
They're
Gen
all
Con and
natural?
realized she was semi-local, so.
Just these 2 right now.
Yeah.
Hold on,
because
before we
these are
start
all.
this game.
Oh,
These are
yeah.
all my
Everyone,
nails, but
you need
they're
to
all
thank Banshee for
Aw.
supporting our Patreon.
Thank you, Banshee.
At the introductory shout out to you, Banshee level. We're gonna shout you out a lot every time we stream.
Woohoo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Banshee.
You're amazing.
Woo!
You were
Thank
awesome at this.
Yeah.
You really are.
she's
She's.
our-
And I love the hat.
It's like a little flag.
The hat sells it.
So, story about this hat. We went to Dragon Con over the weekend.
Yes,
oh
we did.
yeah.
So I already had this hat, but this little flower.
Aww.
So there's a little flower in here, and it was made.
It's a sad story.
It's a sad, but it's a happy story.
It's an uplifting
sad and
story.
happy.
Okay.
So,
It's sappy.
okay.
So, you may have seen it go viral last year, where there was a actually in the past couple years, there was a cosplayer cosplaying the Queen of Thorns
Tyrell.
from House Tyrell in Game of Thrones. So she is in a wheelchair, but it was decorated to be the Iron Throne.
Nice.
And she was wearing like the pixelated shades.
Oh, did you post a photo of that?
Yeah,
Okay,
pixelated shades and carrying a sign saying it was me. Like,
Yep.
yeah. So, totally rocked it. Big fan favorite. She'd been going for years. Her daughter would come with her, and they'd both be dressed up together. And then, but she was an elderly person, and she did unfortunately pass away earlier this year before Dragon Con. So, but her daughter came back dressed up and brought her Iron Throne
Wheeling around the chair.
wheeling around, and had this wreath on it. And so everyone who recognized her was like, oh, I remember you, and I talked to her, and she was so nice, and you were so nice, and everyone just kind of stood around her and sharing stories, and she shared stories about her like last days and what that was like, which is very intense, but it was also like very moving. Everyone was sharing like all these fond memories and good feelings, and she was giving out, and
Yellow
she
roses.
gave out these little yellow roses, so I put it on my hat, and I'm probably never taking it off.
Yeah, it was a
Yep.
pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it was
That's like
a really
the best
cool
thing
thing.
about cons.
So yeah, look up the Queen of Thorns from Dragon Con cosplay.
yeah.
You'll see the whole story, and it'll make your heart feel warm, even though it is somewhat sad. So thanks.
Yay!
Woohoo!
Now play.
Now play!
Play
Now
game
kill one
words.
another.
All right,
Everybody
you
else
guys are
look
gonna
at the
love
hands.
me. You ready? I'm discarding Ashiok Dream Render,
I love that card.
the one that
It's
exiles
so
everybody's
pretty.
graveyard 5 times. I need a land. I need a forest, something that makes green. I'm glad I did that.
I dumped my move, but
I'm really glad I did that.
Excellent.
There we go. All right. You were up
Okay.
first, by the way.
Oh shit. Yep. Easy.
That is the house rule, by the way.
Yes,
She who dies first goes
I
first.
also do the same thing.
Yo.
I've yet to play my Astro deck.
It's fun, but people don't like it.
no.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I
blue tends to like
Blue's got an Astro deck,
rotate,
and-
so
I don't like.
and every time I've been like, I'm gonna play it, and then it's like,
I have a lot of decks that play blue, but I very rarely play it in the traditional like
No.
blue sense.
Huh.
It's very hard in a 4-person game to do that.
Yeah.
And most of our games are 4 people, so we tend to not do like judiciously sprinkle in a couple of
play
things.
A forest, I go.
Yay!
Did you just play an expedition map first turn?
I did say that a lot.
Yeah. Alrighty then.
I'm going to be smart with my land selection and play Meandering River.
There you go.
Yep. Done?
Yes.
By the way, this is
Opulent
how much my
Palace.
nails
Opulent
grew
Palace. Past turn.
from last week at Dragon Con.
So-
Might have
Wow.
really slowly.
So by the way, folks, we are actually wireless. 4 cameras, microphones, all this
So
fun stuff.
if it's slow and awful, please.
But
let
no, I
us
think
know.
people would let us know. But yeah. No,
Oh wait, I'm back up to 40 life rather than dead.
Blood artist.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
no.
a thing.
I don't
I'm
like
done.
that so early in the game.
It's 2 mana.
Yeah, we've dropped 0.1% of our frames, and I suspect it was probably because Jay Bray's over there with like 5 tabs open. I'm just kidding.
I'm
Jay Barry's over there doing us a
Three
favor.
tabs.
Doing us a favor.
I
Yeah,
played
no,
a
all right.
swamp.
She's like
I'm
literally
talking
being
to
all of our administrative support tonight.
Petra.
Pretty much, yeah.
Is in.
If we haven't said thank you, holy fuck, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go.
Oh my! It's my favorite art they've shown.
Which
The
one?
new one.
The Seb McKinnon Order of
The
Midnight.
Corbin
Oh,
Knight.
yeah.
Oh my god, it's
That is
beautiful.
sexy.
Seb is
He's
the thing that kills me
Don't
is it's
shit
all
on his digital artwork.
So he has started doing something and doing one single print Gickleys. What are they, Gickleys?
yeah.
So it's functionally the original art because he'll only make one print of it. So
I mean, and all of his playmats he only prints once as well.
playmats, one
Yeah.
print playmats. No,
Or
no.
No,
like,
one
but
set.
like
Oh, yeah.
one he does the Kickstarters and then you can't
Yeah.
ever get them again.
Jay Barry, you did the Sub McKinnon Kickstarter.
Yeah, I haven't gotten my
Hello.
reward yet.
The second one,
Yeah, the
Yeah.
second
Eric,
I wish
good
I
to
knew
see you
about
again.
the first one.
right?
You deserve a break.
I didn't understand how Kickstarter worked the first time.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize it didn't charge you till the last day, so I didn't support it. I was like, I don't have the money, and then
Yeah.
You're looking for the deck. So I use all these
Yeah.
these
I got
ones that were
the
made to like hold
Order
2
of
decks,
the Eagle playmat,
like these things.
and the Nils Hem, and then
So I have
Yes,
black
I-
ones and
I
red
love
ones,
the
and they're
black
awesome. They're perfect for
Yeah.
commander decks, particularly if you're playing with the big commander card.
I like these, and you can get them signed by Magic artists when
Probably
you go to
good.
cons.
Yep.
Because they were.
Everybody's got their own
It's fun
preferences.
to walk around and ask a bunch of dudes
friends
to
who
sign
were
your
coming
box.
in.
Plus, since I've got, you know, like
Friends got
50
transfers,
decks, I'm not going to go out and
so
spend
they could
$20
see
on
ads, they were getting
50 of those
oh no.
big cube
So they
things.
think they
So,
fixed it.
but I like random ones that
'Cause-
have cool things.
Like squirrels.
Well, it also helps me fucking remember what's in the box.
That's why I like these.
Because
yeah,
I
with
look
the
at
banner on
this
top.
and I'm like, oh,
What
right.
the shit
This,
is that?
this
When
one,
they're playing, I'm like, is this Derevi or is this dinosaurs?
Yep.
Yeah,
This-
these fit double sleeved, by the way.
this
like-
one doesn't have it, but I put like pieces of tape and then I write what deck it is on the top because I don't want to
Thanks.
permanently commit
Yeah.
a deck.
Exactly.
To the
Alcohol wipes will get it off. The cool
Okay.
thing is, though, if you ever bought any of those,
So
like
you played a tap
I've
land.
played another tap land.
any
yeah.
of these boxes,
So
right?
it's-
They come with those stickers, and they actually work. You can put this.
you.
Yeah.
Do you need an alcohol wipe? I have one.
Oh
No,
no,
She's like, I'm prepared.
I have a lot
It
of
was
those that were.
con.
Coiling Oracle. It comes in, reveal the top card. If it's a land, put it into play. Pass turn.
I also have a bunch of the like. Fake
You
leather
are so
boxes.
you're like sneaky and stealthy over there. I know you're announcing them, but there's a fucking expedition map and a blood artist in play over here.
I have said these aloud. There were comments about
Yep.
the blood artist.
I know.
I don't think she's being sneaky. I think you're just not paying
Thank
attention.
you.
Do you need a poster?
Yeah.
Yes.
Here. Done.
You guys are the best.
Oh, Soul Ring.
I need to shout
Forgot I
out
had
this new
that in my
playmat, but I like the art a lot. You can't even see your face though.
I like it. It's got the birdies.
And like all of her stuff in person was amazing.
I'm gonna tap the Soul
Super
Ring
sweet, but I can't
and
remember
cycle the Ash Barrens.
That's drawing a card, or do you
Now
look for a
I
land?
look. It's a land cycling. I draw. I'm basically gonna put an island in my hand.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I'm kind of blue host. But it comes in my hand, not to play.
Awesome.
It's basically just a cycling effect. Oh, there are way
What
too
you
many
doing?
non-basics in this
You
deck.
You played a land. So what you doing now? With your land?
Unless there's something for 3,
That's
go get
not
the
a
fucking
land.
board.
I'm gonna have to.
Did you get a coffers yet?
No. I'm not gonna pay for one.
Let's just proxy it then.
Fuck that.
Fuck
I'm not
that.
paying for magic cards.
You did not hear that on
Ah. Motherfucker. Those are my next 3 draws.
Nah.
Oh no.
It's all good, Rick. Whenever you are ready. I know. Whatever.
You lose to life.
I know.
Oh wait, I'm not at 38.
And that
Are you
card
sure
goes
about
on
that?
top
I'm
of the
positive. I should probably, reset my life total. Really, like, you guys are gonna hate me if I make that Parmacon deck, but it's really good. It's
I don't
gonna
know.
be fun.
I love stupid shenanigans.
I'll play it off stream.
Well, it's not even like
So it's not like a
as long
chaos
as you're not
deck,
sitting
yeah.
next to me, it doesn't matter. I know.
For the record, this is where I always.
Yeah, I know, right?
He says that to me, knowing.
Yeah.
Super mean is I turned the populate deck into a goad deck because I put
Which one was the populate? Oh, the
so I put Marisi as the commander and then I have like Gahiji and then Gisela and stuff in there.
Oh,
and so
that's
that
awesome.
with
So you're
yours
putting at
in
the
play, it would
top
be
of
like
your library,
one
right?
person forced to attack
I'm
the
done.
next person
I've chosen my card.
constantly.
Oh, Goat is shit ton of fun. I actually considered doing that with Saskia.
Okay.
Yes.
But my Saskia deck is... So I went super thematic with it. It's all legendary ladies. It's all legendary women.
That's what my-
Saskia is legendary
That's
women.
what my Kalia deck is. I call it my Powerful Ladies deck.
Oh, that's awesome.
You have a ladies deck. Is that what you were just
That's what we were just talking
I
about.
was reading that. We can get that, Jayberry, we can get that to pop up automatically once I get Nightbot fixed, but I
Okay.
have to Google that because I could not do it on my own.
I am going to play
Are you popping that?
the Rogue's Passage.
Well, no, yeah, I am. Just kidding.
Yeah, you should before somebody destroys it.
Play the Rogue's Passage.
Rogue's Passage is in. The unblockable thing is in.
Yep.
It's anyway, yeah.
I am going to hit you for 2.
Okay.
Commander, by the way. And then I get to put a -1. Yes, I know. Leave it be.
There is no choice but that choice.
Blood Artists.
That's fine.
And I'm assuming I'm taking a point to the face.
Okay.
Thank you.
That is fair.
You didn't lose anything yet, did you?
She did.
Oh.
She lost 2 life.
To the Patra?
No.
Suitor.
And
Oh, to the
I get
tutor.
a sneak.
Why can't I find anything I want?
Because the
And
little
it
baby
has
Jesus
a
hates you
death
and wants you to be
touch,
unhappy.
which I've got to remember.
Little baby
And what
That's
do I
why that
do
thing keeps falling.
now?
That's why my OtterBox is cracked.
Did you really crack your OtterBox? Wow.
It's for a roll.
I'm actually getting it. So you didn't see what happened to my phone at Dragon
No,
Con?
I heard you shattered it or something?
Okay. I am tapping a Rogue's Passage and
So
a
mine got
Forest.
run over
to
by a
play
That's what happened to my phone at
Vivian's-
Dragon Con.
Oh.
Mine got run over by a car multiple
Vivian's
times.
Arcbow.
What's that?
Mine got run over by a car multiple
And
times. Still fine.
then
Crazy.
I
Well, the
am
OtterBox
going
does
to
that.
tap
I have an OtterBox in that one.
Really?
a swamp to play a Festering Mummy.
It festers.
And
Faster.
I'm done. I played a Vivian's Arcbow, by the way, because
I don't know what that does. Let's pull
Nope.
it up.
pull it up.
Not at all.
Do I want this one or this one though?
Vivian. Spell Vivian. V-I-E-N.
Vivien. There you go. That one.
Yeah. So discard a card, look at the top X. So pay X, tap it, discard a card. You may put a creature card. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So again, I don't have a lot of mana right now. I don't have any of my super fun cycling cards
I already,
Gotcha.
or discard.
Because it's already there. It's
I
already
already
there.
tutored.
Pay and
That's some
choose.
sweet art.
Put
It
down
is, it's
Tyrant's
gorgeous.
Machine.
Tyrant's Machine. Is that the one that taps
Yes.
as well as yeah? Is it just tap?
Just tap.
Got it.
Has to pay 4 though.
Yeah, that's expensive. But and
It's-
that's it.
All right. Untap, upkeep, draw. Play that.
Probably not like fling my rings across the room.
Should happen.
I am going to play my commander. So-
What does that one do again? The
It's the first morph free, and then I think whenever he plays one, he gets to draw.
I'm gonna play that morph. And whenever it enters the battlefield, whenever a face down creature enters the battlefield under control, I draw a card.
Okay.
So that's a morphed thing. and pass turn. Oh. Thank you for this, by the way. This bourbon is wonderful. Jayberry, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm having some.
You're having more than some. You go, girl.
Done.
That's your second glass, isn't it?
No, it's my first.
Oh, is it?
It's my first.
You can do it in
I thought I must have mistaken you for
I sipped some of
NPCs.
I would know nothing. What do you mean? I'm going to play a forest. And then, in super fun, true fashion, what am I doing with my life?
That's a fucking move.
Gonna hit you for 2,
Cheers.
Commander.
Yeah, cheers
Nope.
to
I need
that. True with tea.
Yeah,
and
true
then,
Tea.
because I hit her with my commander, I'm gonna -1 counter your oracle.
Oracle dies.
I'm just gonna keep track of how many.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is she's not going to kill you. I
Yes,
just
she is.
need
I
a
mean,
little
she
space.
might.
She is gonna kill us.
Like, I don't think you're gonna die because of commander damage.
I would hope
that's
not.
how Allison's Petra deck works.
Yeah, well, infect, and I don't. This is not that.
It's not an infect deck.
I was explaining. So, I have this weird cycling discard undertone for this. This is why the bow is there. Like, so past turn. I like weird decks.
Yeah.
Like, they may not be the I'm going to kill everyone.
I'm doing this at the end of your turn just in case you're gonna make me shuffle my library. I'm tutoring.
Okay.
Wait, how? How
It's
do
an
you
instant.
have?
I have 1 black.
Okay. Sorry.
And I lose 2
So
life.
land return, and now I can finally, like exactly on curve, bring out Estrid.
Oh, boys.
And she's a 3. And I'm actually going to
Take her
-1 her. Yeah. If I can find 2.
Bold move.
And
Put a mask on.
put a mask on Woodland Stream.
Yeah, that's gonna have to be the thing.
I'm gonna waste all of my beautiful mask cards because I left all of my other mask tokens at
I have
home.
mask tokens in there if you need. Oh, if they're actually they're probably my Esther deck. But take a look under M. Everything's alphabetized.
Yes,
Yeah.
I just have no idea where M is.
Hey, I put back the elementals, by the way, in the right place. So if they're in the wrong place,
I have
someone
manifest
else
tokens
did
if you
that.
need them. Yep.
Whose turn is it?
Well, it might be mine. I'm not sure.
It is indeed yours.
Wow. I didn't notice your, like, sexy lady card backer.
They're the Frank Frazetta Vampirella.
Wow.
It's Booberella.
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 The card I drew is in my hand from the tutor. I forget what that is. See, we're already there.
It's an off-meta clock.
All right.
It's that period between not meta clock and not visiting a clock yet.
Exactly. You're all welcome.
Oh no.
No, really.
What?
More land.
Trigon
It's a
Predator.
I don't know what that
What
thing
is
is.
that?
It's
do?
in the deck just to stop that. Well, things like that.
It's a land
No.
Here.
pterodactyl.
It's a Bestia. Oh,
Oh,
really?
that is definitely mine.
Really?
You picked the Spanish version? Good job.
Maybe I spelled it wrong. Trygon.
It's the Italian version.
Oh yeah, predatory.
Yep. There we go.
I could have read that though.
Ah,
Yeah.
I hate it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Banshee, you get citizenship on Whore Island.
And Secret
Woohoo!
Plans.
That should be
Oh
like the
my
$1
God.
perk.
We should do
Yes.
Yes.
All right, working on it.
Wow. Alrighty
You
then.
want me to put that?
I
on
don't
there
know if you
with
should
it?
put Whore Island,
Yeah.
but maybe on Coven's secret, like, gathering space
All
or
right.
something ridiculous.
I have also played a
Coven's
Secret
secret
Plans.
hideout.
That's pretty cool art,
Well,
actually.
we'll just
It's
say
Darken, of course, right?
Not
yeah.
Whore Island.
Yeah. Well, when we give them the shout out every stream, we'll
Okay.
say And you remember you have honorary citizenship on Whore Island.
I am not attacking anyone. I'm gonna sit tight.
Get like a little.
You know, if we ever get Whore
Artist
Island
driver's
merchandise
license.
or maps,
Leave me
that
alone
could
so I can take care of
that
the
could be a
ridiculous
reward,
enchantments.
Too.
I'll say like. Be like a
You
little,
need to go after Estrid.
I'm into it.
I'm doing nothing right now.
That's what that deck does. It does nothing and then he kills you with one creature.
That's basically what all of my decks do.
That's fun.
No, the last game
Oh,
did
God,
not.
you're all fucking
well,
friends.
yes, you killed me with one creature.
I'm assuming you're tutoring. She exists to tutor twice.
Yes.
Or once, depending
No,
on
well,
how it goes.
There are better targets. Well, I don't know if you want to let that deck tutor twice. Liliana Vess. Yeah.
I like that artwork.
It's not the one you play.
No.
That's the one from the Garrick versus Liliana dual deck. The one played is this one.
Yeah, it's probably.
Did I fucking no? Did I draw a card? I feel like I didn't draw a card. What do you-
I feel like I didn't draw a card.
No, I did. It was a.
Hey,
it was
go ahead, draw a
swamp.
card.
It was a swamp and I played it.
I need an adult.
Oh, Chamber.
And there's the third time. There we go. We might not say in the rewards due to limits on what we can say on Patreon. I have no idea what the hell this conversation is about.
Of course I
Whether we can say that they have membership to Whore Island as a reward.
I would probably not say that.
Not like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have special dispensation.
Where's Bonnie?
What?
Where's Bonnie?
Oh, Bunny, she had a really busy day today, so.
Well, viewers, if
It's
we
time.
ever got our official Whore Island Coven merchandise, or something that we make with all of the cool maps and things and ideas that our friend Bunny has given us related to Whore Island, would you like that as a reward? Tell us in the comments.
Tell us in the comments.
For those of you who are inside joke of go back to your home on Whore Island and all the
Anchorman.
shenanigans that came from, that originated from that.
Right. And,
In
you
the
know,
stream.
Cape Girl and my entire relationship is built on Anchorman quotes. Or what is it, the meme that was going around before the internet? It was just men sitting around in a circle telling Anchorman quotes.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's not wrong.
No.
By the way,
There you are.
I've never actually seen the Anchorman movie. And
I-
You should wa- this- we
You know
we
who
like to
hasn't?
pretend
He
this-
hasn't.
we
You
like-
know who doesn't
Shut
watch
up.
it
because
all the
he's
way
younger
through?
than that movie.
I haven't seen it all the way
Isn't it?
through.
We need to have an Anchorman night.
I will happily
I
have an
haven't
Anchorman night.
either. I traded it with a friend one time because, like,
You're up, by the way.
am I up?
No. Yes.
Well, she's got to finish touring, but.
Yeah, I know I've chosen. You're good.
Oh, okay.
Also,
Yes.
I mean, we can't show the entire movie, but
Watch party.
could we live stream us watching Anchorman?
No.
No.
That's an,
Hey,
I
I'm
mean,
pretty
if the
sure that I
audio's
told-
turned off and
I
you just
told
see
you
the
that
face
recently.
react.
that is a monstrous IP violation.
I know. But I figured, could that be something we...
Facebook watch party.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's certain movies you can and can't.
Well, we could watch it and then live tweet our responses to it.
I don't know what to do.
You all
There's
just
two
have to tune it at the
planeswalkers
same
out,
time.
and
It started at the same time.
it's like...
True. Cue
That
up the
one
movie,
is worse.
press play.
Because this one's already
Yeah.
done half of what it's ever gonna do. This Vess exists to tutor twice. That is her sole reason for being.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I don't know.
Remember that
What's our
time
ult?
that
You could alt it, but
remember
it's
that time
way
that
too
I
early to alt
ultimated
it.
it?
Yeah, it's way
That
too
one
early to alt
time?
it. That one time?
there's no way it's gonna happen.
No, not in this game.
That one time on Whore Island?
We don't speak about these things.
Oh, we don't?
Not
I don't know.
On live stream.
Oh.
Or
Fisting.
Island.
This thing over clock.
It is 53 minutes to the fisting hour and my birthday.
Ooh, bad combination.
Oh, God.
no.
Don't bird face me. Bird
Bird claw. At least I'm not trying to pull feathers out of your butt.
Yep.
Ask her to explain it.
Yep.
That's the reason that exists, apparently.
That's legit.
the one bird tries to, it pushes the other one away from the food and also plucks the feathers out of it.
No.
Oh.
So
Take your turn and then tell the story.
hang on. So one, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna hit Estrid for 2. That means I'm probably not getting the snake because that's not doing combat damage
To a player.
someone.
Yeah.
So say thank you because I could have a little snakey. I want my little snakey.
You want your little snakey?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you're not throwing around -1/-1 counters.
But I'm going to tap.
Is Estrid only a 2?
She's 4. Oh no, she was at 2 because.
Oh, because what did you do?
I enchanted a land.
Oh, okay. Now I'm worried.
What?
She made a land indestructible with the mask. I'm like, what the fuck does that deck do?
Every time I +2 her, I can untap everything that's enchanted.
Right. Which
Yeah.
land is that?
It's a dual woodland stream, so just 4.
Woodland
So
stream.
it's just a blue or green.
Just a blue
Alright.
green.
Probably not. You know what?
It's
Fine.
not scary at all.
It's not-
I
not
am
scary.
going
I'm just trying to figure out what the hell that's about.
not a
It's
cobalt
about land
copper or
ramp, is what
anything.
it's about.
Fine. I am going
Shut
to tap my bow and tap 5 and discard a card. Which card am I discarding?
Why are you discard? You have to discard as that part of the bow.
Yeah. So, like, it's not the most awesomest thing in the world.
It's
but
great in
when
black green though.
Well,
In
when
black
I-
green-
So, with a cycling discard under theme, if I had the stuff out that worked with that, it would
go off,
work. But right now I
Yeah,
don't.
hold on for a second.
Excellent.
I might have forgotten something. No, that's in Anya. Sorry.
Okay.
There's a card. What is it? It's a black card from Amonkhet that's useless in most things.
You know what?
And it's whenever you discard a card, each opponent loses 2 life.
Yes! Oh my god!
And it's just like, oh,
am
shotgun, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Hey, there we go.
Rid
I-
of Wandering Death, it would have brought me back 2 cards or cycling.
Do you have to reveal? Let's see what she reveals
Do
and
I
then tell
have
me
to
the story.
reveal? Look at. No, I don't. So.
Oh, you don't. You just look at. So go ahead, tell the story while she's
At
figuring it
Commander
out.
Weekend, in the event, you were allowed to switch out up to 5 cards, and one of the cards I switched in was that. And so with Anya in play,
No,
I
it's in the deck.
oh, it's in the deck. I was like,
Yeah, it's.
no, 'cause I had them both, and I was just,
Pull it up because it really is
oh,
like.
it was so mean.
I would never use it in anything, and then I'm like, holy shit!
It was
just
so
turbocharges
good with
it.
her, yeah.
This thing, it's this like a lot of these this cycle of commander decks get shut down by graveyard hate.
So.
Yes.
Evolutionary Sage.
Oh, what does the evolutionary sage do?
Yes, pull that up. It matters for a Vetra.
Oh no. Does it do snack things?
And then they go at the bottom. of the
EVOLUTION.
Sage. You were writing snake.
It's not a snake. It's a sage. Probably should have done sage. Like space.
There it is, you're on it.
Yep, that one.
Oh, it's not evolutionary. It's evolution sage.
Sorry.
Whenever landers battlefield, proliferate.
I had that in my hand in the last game.
Oh, I should bring that up. That's awful.
That is awful.
That's terrible.
Not for you right now. For him.
I'm just
For
out of
now.
curiosity. Yep. Selling for 80 cents already, an uncommon. Is it still, it's still in standard, right?
I believe so.
Or the Spark? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Pass turn.
Yeah, that's going to be awful in a whole bunch of commander decks.
Yes, I have it in many of them, including Atraxa, including my wolf deck.
Atraxa is just...
including-
War of the Spark gave Atraxa... just,
Yeah.
like, it
I know.
just- like,
How much is Atraxa going for
oh,
currently?
I have
Not
no idea.
as
Like
much as
20
she
bucks?
used to,
It's
yeah.
all the components of Atraxa
Yeah.
that go for. It's all the proliferate shit.
She's got the like whole deal going for pretty much.
And the funny thing is, like, so she's still paying for. She's still selling for $30.
Yeah.
The oversized is 15.
So she shot up because she wasn't 30. She was like 15 before War of the Spark, and
Yeah.
then they were like, Yes.
Like, it's just ridiculous because no matter which fucking Atraxa deck you put, if you do Super Friends or if you just do counters on shit,
Yep.
Yeah.
it's still like turbocharged all of it.
It was great.
It's ridiculous. Oh, and so
So
that card, if I
evolution
can find
surge,
it.
yes.
Ah,
It's good in
that's
a
not
lot
what
of
I wanted to
ways.
do. That's not what I wanted to do at all.
What did you?
So,
No.
oh no.
We're good. We're good.
Paying a
we're good.
green to enchant this other land.
I don't know what so you're gonna end up turning lands into creatures and beating us with them, I suspect.
No, it's literally just I like having
Lots
a lot
of
of
mana.
mana.
All right.
And the easiest way for her is to just enchant everything and tap it twice.
Alrighty then.
And yeah, that is all I can do.
Oh yeah, you
Yes,
guys
sir.
would not be happy. Like nobody gets a hand with this deck.
Boo.
It's just a
Trigger
whole
deck.
bunch of like all your opponents discard a card.
Oh,
Maybe
a Johnny?
No,
No,
Anya.
stream?
Yeah.
What's that?
Maybe we play that not on stream.
Yeah, maybe we play that not on stream. All right, untap, upkeep, draw.
Welcome back,
Must
Captain
be
Harris.
Stream dynamic.
Where are you that it's dinner time? Because it's almost midnight here.
It's
Anywhere that's not the East
West Coast?
or
Yeah.
also anywhere that
I
people
mean-
don't eat dinner at normal time.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost midnight here, so even on the West Coast, it's 8 o'clock.
yeah, but some
I
folks
used to eat
eat
dinner at 10
late.
o'clock,
Yeah,
so-
you know?
Yeah,
That's dinner.
alright.
Like-
Oh,
Sorry, that's
San Diego
Yeah.
means whale's vagina. Did you know?
Which in the native language means whale's vagina.
Full circle.
Yes, we
I
have.
said that to Jake the other day and he had no idea what I was talking
Oh,
about.
no.
That's hilarious.
We're talking about War Island again.
Yes, Horror Islands come up again.
All right, you know what? You don't.
Minute now.
Do you really think I'm the worst of it?
I know, but she's got
Yes.
nothing in play, so honestly,
Right now, yes.
I'm gonna move to my attack phase. I'm gonna hit you for 2 flying.
Okay.
I'm gonna blow up the arc bow.
Okay.
That is the only attack I'm making this turn. And then I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Play a Whisperwood Elemental. I should bring
What
that
does
up
that
because it
do?
does stupid shit.
We don't speak of these things.
Alright. So at the beginning of my end step, I manifest the top card of my library, and I can sacrifice this thing until the end of the turn. Face up non-token creatures I control gain. When it dies, I manifest the top card of my library, put it into play. So
That's not good.
I'm entering my end step. I'm going to manifest the top card of my library. I draw a card because a face down creature entered the battlefield under my control. That is not a morph, but a manifest.
What does manifest mean?
You take the
2/2,
top. So
okay.
instead of playing a card face down as a morph, as a 2/2 creature, it's a 2/2 creature, but it was played from the top of your library.
Okay.
And you can flip
So
it
it's
face
not
up
a
for
morph,
its.
though.
You can
It
still
could
flip
be a
face
morph.
face up for its mana cost.
Right. However, a good half of the things in my deck are morphs, so I could either pay the mana cost or the morph cost if it's a manifested morph creature.
Okay.
And if you manifest something from our deck, he can only flip it up if he's
If
makes
there's a
the mana.
cost, yeah. Like if I get a land from you, oh well. Or if I get an instant or sorcery, it's nothing. Sorry, you didn't do it that way. Go ahead, Pastor.
Sounds throwback.
Yeah. God, Fear Factory? How long ago? Are they still around? They're still around, aren't they?
Yeah, they still tour every once in a while. Burton Bell
They're
does
Brazilian?
a bunch of stuff.
Were they?
No, they're American.
I thought they were South American.
I don't think so. But this
Alright,
is,
anyway.
yeah. I saw them like 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Really? I saw them like 15 years.
Somebody I know is familiar with
I
them.
was still in school. No, it was right out of law school.
P-Pal.
Oh my god, it's a bag of Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab stuff. That's funny.
They did not give me a ton of ones, even though I like went a little bananas.
Oh, I gotta do this.
Do you like them? Like a lot?
Hmm?
Do you like them a lot? Because I have a
Like a bunch of imps.
a big bag of them that was just given to me a few years ago, and I've literally never used any.
Nice.
Bring them. I'm sure
Yeah.
someone
Bring 'em,
here will
yeah.
take them.
Take
Next
them.
time, you know, next
I
time you're
hoard
over.
stuff I don't need.
I mean, I like them. I'm currently wearing
What are you wearing?
I found them yesterday.
Luke something. Like,
Not
it's-
Luke Skywalker.
No, it's a Bible verse.
Oh,
They were
you're wearing B-Pal named after Bible verse.
Well, because they were doing it for the, fuck you, you're saying you're using your Bible as an excuse to, like, keep out immigrants. Well, here are some quotes that might
here's
be
some
meaningful.
quotes that, you know,
Like,
love your neighbor as your friend.
Yeah.
I bought lemon scented sticky bat.
Sticky bat.
Yeah.
That was the cutest mental image ever.
Somebody clip that, please. I bought lemon scented sticky
You know,
bat.
that sounds like one of the pre-made clip names.
Yeah, it's true.
It's actually a true story from Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
Aw.
He found it. It involved a bat that got stuck to something, and then he had to get it off the thing that was sticky with a bunch of lemon scented oil. So it was a lemon scented sticky bat.
That was adorable.
And you should read the story online because he tells it way better than anyone. So
I have him.
What does
speaking
her
at
plus up
workshop.
ability do?
Yes,
Target opponent discards a card.
I'll never do that.
Well,
you.
if somebody doesn't kill it, she will.
Yeah.
Send a snake at it.
I don't imagine she'll ever live. Pass.
Well, right. Well, I didn't attack it because I was dumb and forgot.
Shit happens.
Well.
Sorry, I'm doing the tutor thing. I am actually doing things over here.
We're waiting. Well, this is our waiting for Val the Tutor song. Do 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 do.
Bad.
And we're
You're
terrible
bad.
weevils. We're like all in different. Yeah.
That explains the stream so much.
Wait, you know what? Everybody's got to go in circles like this.
no, I
There we
don't.
go.
No, I hate it.
It's making me dizzy.
Carrying all the stress on my shoulders.
Aw.
I don't know which term.
Hard.
Did you
Sorry.
have a good time at Dragon Con?
I did.
It was a crazy ass thing. It was.
As what did Cave Girl say was I'm a terrible person. ITV. Like, I'm a terrible person. Like
Cybertronic Spree liked our picture.
Oh,
The
nice.
band was like, yes, nice picture.
We were dancing.
You were dancing.
Shenanigans. Yes.
You spent half of your time trying to make me dance. I'm like, I don't dance. And you're like, you're gonna dance. I'm like, no, I'm
Chamber
not.
was dancing too.
Dancing, I'm really drunk.
I was not drunk enough to dance.
Man, I failed at my job then. We should have got you.
Wait, was your job
got
to
you-
get me drunk or enough to dance, or to get me to
See,
dance?
we took turns.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I guess they're kind of the same.
Friday, you were more intoxicated.
Well, yeah.
Saturday, I was
Because
more
I had
intoxicated.
stuff I needed to do on Sunday.
Like,
I actually had to teach a class and go to my screening. And
How'd the screening go?
really well. I mean, we had a packed thing. We didn't win anything, but I mean, we didn't. It's a short film festival, so
Oh,
for them
cool.
to actually admit a feature-length documentary,
yeah.
it's a thing.
Okay, so what's the plan?
Sorry, I just had to go through the entire deck.
But we met a
And
lot
you
of really
put
cool,
something
interesting
on
people.
top?
And Cape Girl and I run the.
Or-
Do you do Origins?
No, it's
Well, I mean,
Um,
you put something on
I
top of your
haven't,
hand.
but AC10 does, yeah.
You should put in
But
to
are
go with
you
them
still
because we
considering
go.
your options?
Cape Girl and I run the film festival
It's
No,
it's
I'm
the
done.
same weekend as
just now. I'll put that.
it's
on
either the
top.
weekend before or the same weekend as like PAX Unplugged,
Okay.
I think.
Are you
No, Origins is
playing
in like May or
something?
Is
June.
in May or June. Okay.
PAX Unplugged
It's
is
December. Okay,
Yeah.
I know it overlaps with something else because I think that's one of the ones where we split teams. But
Gotcha.
I want to
But
go.
you should put it in to go
Yeah.
because we went last year. It was a shit ton of fun, and
And what is
NPC
this
is
card?
going to come with us this year,
I'll put it on
hopefully.
top once I shuffle.
It
Origins.
Origins?
In the spring.
What is that?
That's the one that I can actually get you fuckers rooms for,
Okay.
For what?
because I get extra rooms for film festival
Oh,
helpers,
nice.
right?
'Cause that's,
So as long as you guys
Chicago,
actually
right?
do some work,
What?
Origins. It's the one that I can actually get folks rooms for.
Okay.
Origins Chicago?
No, it's
No.
in Columbus, Ohio.
That's where I met Jake.
It is. Oh, where you meet your boy?
Over a table of magic cards, literally.
Imagine that.
Literally over the table,
That's the dream.
Yeah.
right? We spent the morning eating breakfast and deck building. It's kind of the best.
Yeah, I was like, once again, the dream.
Right?
So.
You are living the dream.
I know. I steal his youth.
Legit.
I am that.
He's
Somebody,
watching.
somebody fucking clip that.
No. We don't
Jake, clip that.
No.
Yes.
Just make that text message.
Yes, clip that.
We don't text. We live together.
Which morph things do I hate less? Do I like
They're all the
We
same.
don't know.
They're 2/3 creatures.
2, 3?
Because the secret plans gives face down creatures +0/+1.
Fuck.
That's not good.
Still gonna take a turn. You have a lot of mana.
What is it? Tangible, fine arugula,
Yeah.
unsane. I love
Tangible fine arugula unsane is the name of the clip.
that was his.
Oh.
So they come with the most ridiculous names when you clip something.
That
And I'm
face
sure
looks
that
like a
clip
red
is
panda.
that clip. I'm sure that clip is her saying, "I steal your
Oh, I really.
Well,
hope.
yeah, because look at his face.
Yup. That's the face of a man who knows he's gonna get beat, and maybe in a fun way.
Don't beat him.
Crap.
Not even. Never mind. More than I
He's
ever
playing
wanted to know.
Magic
Just don't answer
competitively.
that.
I can't beat him in Magic.
Fine, I hate to do it this way, but I'm
so
going
cute
to
that you thought I was talking
because
about magic.
you are gonna tap my
I was just
creature.
trying to circumvent the entire.
I just realized why that mana is open. But I've
You
got
win.
a rogue's
You made me
passage.
snort.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna attack you though.
It's not even fisting your
Because
clock
if I'm
yet.
gonna rogue's passage, may
will
as
be.
well.
May as
So
well
I'm
hit
scared.
the person with
I'm
all the
using
stuff.
my rogue's passage to hit you.
Murder.
Okay.
Which means it can't be blocked.
Sure.
And then I get to place a -1 counter on something. It is probably gonna be your Tergon Predator.
Okay. It's a
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Oh, it's okay. It's a one. I don't care. It just needs to do damage to somebody.
And then I'm gonna
Yes, we
play
should definitely kill that one.
land per turn, which means I can proliferate. So now it has 2 -1 counters on it.
Okay. It's a 0/1. Does no damage. Why did you do that? Do you have anything in play that it matters for?
Not right now.
You really did that with Estrid sitting next to you. Are you sure you want to do that?
But you fucked with my butt.
Oh
Fine.
my god.
Put it on your commander then.
There we go. My commander has, like, there.
2.
Okay,
No.
my commander is a 1/1 now.
Hey. Happy now? A little less bitter.
I'm still fucking bitter, but, you know, you could have put 2 things on Lithonia.
So, question for you though. Proliferate when I do that. So
Or
I
you could have
get-
killed the Planeswalker.
So I get a snake. Do I get another
No.
snake?
No, it's
No,
only
because I'm
When it
not
does combat
placing
damage.
it. I'm just picking it up.
Yeah.
No, whenever I put a -1.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah, no,
oh, yeah,
proliferate
you
is
get,
put another counter on.
yeah, so
Oh.
you get
Yeah.
you get another snake.
That's the snake friends.
I
Woo!
want another
Yay.
snake.
There we go. You guys don't need another.
We only have one. The other one died. Like right.
Then that's why you don't get another snake. No.
No, no snakes for you.
What type
Too
of
many
snake do you
reptiles.
We
have?
literally have like 20 pets in the house right now.
Yeah. No. Go ahead. Done. Sorry.
No.
Not good
Getting
at
snake
the.
shamed.
Yes. Like.
I'm getting snake shamed?
Yes,
That's not a
what's
phrase you
happening.
hear
Well,
every day.
fine.
I'm getting snake
I
Everyone
wish
has
shamed.
it
to
was
say
a
the
phrase
snake
I heard
names,
every
Aaron.
day.
Yeah.
It's a
If you
great
guys
phrase.
adopt, rather than like catch in the wild, because
He's
I
gotten
saw
all
the
of
frog
them-
post.
Okay, he's gotten all of them from like crackheads, and they needed to be like liberated to decent homes.
Like, I'm not okay with catching
I had a
little wild
weird ass
froggies.
conversation with a chick at Dragon Con after everybody had gone to bed, and she was talking about how she gets shame kinked because humiliation is her kink. And she's like, yeah, I get
Nice.
shame kinked, not kink, like, yeah.
Oh, that's
And I'm just like,
Oh, wow.
there's a conversation to have.
That is great.
Or were you there? Was it you or Jay Berry riding up the escalator with me where
Oh my god, I was there.
thereby proving my point that if there's a stripper in the room, she will sit down next to me.
Like, Cave Girl
You've said
was
this
like,
before.
Cave Girl was like, who the fuck is that?
And literally, she's holding my arm. My hot wife is holding my arm, and this chick with her boobs hanging. I was like, "Hey, how are you? Is my tongue blue?"
I know, I
I'm like,
saw.
Wow. And then she goes on to explain how she
look,
was the.
Estrid is back.
Estrid's back and she untapped stuff.
Yeah.
Looks at him and like walk on.
Yeah. Well, and she went on to explain how she was Miss Harley Davidson for like the last 5 years. I'm like, alrighty then.
Congrats, you big weirdo.
Yeah.
It was amusing as shit.
That might mean something in your circle, but in ours it doesn't.
Yeah.
Anything after Estrid?
Nope.
Alright, untap, upkeep, draw. I draw a card. Does that have any draw card triggers? I do not. God damn it, I have to do damage to a player. I want to kill Estrid.
Not it.
Yep.
Since you showed no initiative last turn, I'm going to enter my combat phase, and I'm going to kill Liliana.
That's fine. I knew that was gonna happen.
Yeah, there you go.
It's not a big deal.
Alright.
By the way, why do those snakes have a bunch of arms?
I think it's to represent the death touch because
They're
they're a lot of swords.
they're Naga snakes. They look like Kamigawa
I
snakes.
know, like Steve looks like a no Gary.
Steve.
Gary.
Gary
No,
looks
Steve,
like
it's Steve.
Steve. Okay.
Yeah.
Sakura
Steve
Tribal.
looks like
I
a
do Steve.
turtle.
All right, so you guys need to know what I
does
just
not
played
look like-
because
Yes, I
it's
do.
awful.
Oh no.
Great. Oh yeah, that's awful.
I played a Psychosis Crawler. It is a 4/4.
No.
No, oh, people don't like Psychosis Crawlers. Would you like to counter that? Look, you went to look for something. I'm like, oh, alrighty then. Right now it's a 4/4.
That's in my Tashana deck.
I'm gonna play
I
this
wonder
creature
why.
face down.
Oh no!
And sorry. I play that creature face down, enters the battlefield,
Change the
I
view.
draw a card. Everybody lose a life. And that is now a 5/5.
Just one.
I enter the end
Yes,
of my
that's
enter
one.
my end step, and I manifest the top card of my library. Everybody lose a life, because I drew a card.
Is that drawing a card?
No,
He
it
draws
isn't.
a card every time he manifests, I think.
Gets put in, so no, that is not.
Okay.
Ha.
But no. Well, a face down creature came in,
Yeah.
so I draw a card.
Oh,
Because of my
commander.
command, right.
fine.
Yep.
But
That's a manifest, not a morph. Hey, that Whisperwood Elemental's pretty cool.
wait a second. How big is that one though? Fuck! I should have killed that one.
What? It's a 4/4. It's gonna take you a while. I
Yeah.
don't care about that one.
Ooh, thanks for the
This-
sub, Mullen.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, look! Oh, the little. And
It's
I don't have the.
I cheered.
Oh, you cheered.
You also
Oh,
can't see it,
it's
but I
Val.
cheered with the salt. The
Oh,
salt
that's funny.
emojis.
The salty.
Yeah.
I should,
Oh, thank you.
There's our little dancing.
I'll say, I
and
think that one's my
Oh shit.
I apologize
Wait,
for the
this is
volume of
important.
that.
Mullen just gifted
Does it
a tier 1 sub
Thank you.
to Coven's community. They
Yay!
just gifted a total of 5 subs.
Yay! You guys are awesome.
So they subbed for tier 1 to Captain Harris.
Captain
Oh,
Harris.
thank you.
Jake.
Dude, you guys are awesome.
And
Thank you.
Jayberry. And
Oh yay!
I'm gonna pass turn. But thank you for all of that. I will
Val,
cheers you.
it's you.
Thank you for the birthday present. It is my birthday at midnight and Jay Burry's birthday on Saturday.
Yay, Banshee! Thank you for subbing.
Yay.
Holy shit, you know? Jay Burry, you're like awesome at this. Like all this shit's happening tonight because you're doing all this ridiculous
Yeah.
like
Look at all these
management.
little
sheeps. I do want to play sometimes. though.
Well, I
Just
suspect
don't wanna
Clover's gonna
be
turn into a
administrative.
pumpkin after this game.
Yes. Yes.
he does.
Yeah.
She already looks like she's like
I mean,
melting a little
I
bit.
took
Did
a
you announce
power
that last
nap.
turn?
I've only been up for like
18
18-ish hours at this point.
High five,
Hey,
Fred! That's
so
right.
guys-
No one is listening.
Yeah, guys,
I
no
was
one was
up at
listening to Valinix
5.
last turn. Urborg's in play. Everything's a swamp in addition to what it is.
Okay.
For everyone.
So, everything's a swamp in addition to whatever its normal land type is.
Yes.
So that
Thank
just
you for all of that,
means-
guys. We
Wait,
really appreciate it.
So that
I'll
just
teach you how to
means
sub when I
I
get
can.
home.
This is
That
a
sounds
forest
really
or
bad.
swamp.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that
everything
helps
taps
you.
for whatever it is or black.
And it
The problem is everything is swamp walk now. Any swamp walk creatures are free to hit anybody.
I'm not worried about that.
I think there's actually like 3 swamp walk
I'm
things in
glad
this
that y'all were
deck.
I think,
talking over
there's
me
at
when
least
I said
one.
that,
Yeah.
because that would have been a problem to be clipped.
What you doing?
None.
Oh, hey, doubling your black mono production, Nirkana Revenant. All right, let me pull that up for people who don't know, but everybody should know.
Otherwise done.
Did everybody take 2 damage by the way last turn?
Yeah. For what?
your turn?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did I take 1 for?
You should have taken 2.
You should be.
Actually, total.
Because I took 1.
So.
I really like that art.
It's gorgeous.
What
so
you
pretty.
doing?
I'm done.
Okay. Untap.
Yeah, seriously. I really appreciate everybody's hard work and
Yeah.
well, it's our hard work, but your effort. Seriously,
Well, if we didn't have people out there
yeah,
watching, hanging out, talking to us, we wouldn't be very exciting, would we?
we're fucking boring. Who are you talking to?
I mean, I'm old, but I'm old and tired.
Says the
but I'm
youngest
not
person at the
boring.
table.
Am I?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We're not gonna say specific dates, but probably.
Let's not do that.
There's a reason I put all the blonde in the hair. It's to hide all the fucking gray.
You're a vampire. What else?
Shut it. I really do need to cosplay Soren.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my
So-
god, yes.
I am.
If I can get somebody to make me some leather armor, off we go.
Oh, I have a friend that can do that for you.
You know,
I
your
am
friend-
psychic.
I have tons of friends who can make. Yeah.
I'm cycling Scarab Feast.
Okay.
Draw a card. Okay, that's what I wanted. Okay. Now what the fuck am I doing?
Shh, we don't speak of these things on stream. Maybe.
How much land do you have open?
Just 3 right now.
So here's the fun thing for the people watching who like
Okay,
are interested
so
in
I'm gonna
tech
leave
at all.
Esther alone
The
against my
the two face cams, this one right here and this one
More
right here,
so because I went up.
are actually iPhones. Believe it or not,
So-
they have
Oh no, because
like they're better than webcams,
I'm gonna
and
hit
until
you
you
for
stepped
2.
up to like
Okay.
a $1,500 dedicated camera, like video camera, they're
I'm
actually the
gonna
best
get
you can
my
get,
snake.
which is funny as hell. So if anybody else is interested in streamy things,
Streamy things.
streamy things,
And let's see, what else do I want?
yeah.
I want.
What are you trying to do?
What is the thing that's allowing you to do the not only morph but
the manifest.
yeah?
The Whisperwood Elemental.
Okay.
I mean, my commander lets me play a morph for free every turn, but that's 3 mana.
Put the
But
negative.
the Whisperwood Elemental gives me a free.
Put a -1 counter on that
Okay.
because I hit her for 2 with a Petra.
Sure.
Um,
It's a 3/3 now.
and then I'm going to play land for turn, which that means your commander's
Why did you play the
dead.
land?
I haven't played a land yet.
Oh, right.
So your commander now like proliferate.
Yep, my commander's dead.
Little cupcakes.
And
I
then
love little cupcakes.
that
That's
one
2.
counts. Yep.
Oh.
And clearly I'm not taking
You're not going
up-
to take my.
Yeah.
No. That's not counters.
that's
That
not
just is
counters,
the power
yeah.
of that creature. It's just to remind me.
Let's see. So, and
So while she's taking her turn, I'm going to actually show these. I need to make the little holders for them. But I picked them up when I was out west, and they're these stupid little magnetic rocks,
Oh yeah.
right? But I need to make little holders for them. So here's what they look like. They're awesome, and they're magnetic. They're hard to pull apart even. But you can actually get them to stand up in the little holder. So I need to drill the right size hole. There it is. Right? So I'm going to make little stands, and they'll be signifiers for how many times you played your commander. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they look like straight up. What? There we go. Here.
Let's just drop things on stream.
That's kind of what they look like straight up and on. Pretty cool.
And then
But
It's very confused by Mac somewhere around there.
here, if you want to look at them.
Die.
Yeah. Play, touch.
since I'm
I feel like I knew somebody in
are
high
you
school
gonna
who had
how
one,
much
like,
fun
throw
do you
them up in
have
the air
enough
and
to pop off Ionia?
No.
Not right now. But next turn. She's got double black right now.
I only have 6. I have to have 8 pop roll.
She's got. Well, no, you have. Everything's a swamp because of Urbar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you got 12 because of that.
Oh fuck, I completely forgot that was in play. Just kidding.
Well, you just played it,
I know, that's why.
But you
but you don't want to
kill
pop Pythonia because you kill it.
Yes, I'm more.
Let's see. Then I'm gonna
Pretty.
Take a
They are
chance.
pretty magnets.
Hang on. I am going to tap.
Well, you know what? You can, hopefully, if you just go hang out at your local store, you'll find some fun people. Your LGS will help hook you up with people. Seriously.
Tap. This.
Captain Harris hoping he could find an MTG group like this.
Yeah.
But I mean, so I've been
We're
doing a
just
game
big
night.
nerds.
I've been doing a game night for like, wow, 18 years through 2 ex-wives. And it's funny, like in the divorce, I always know who I'm gonna get because they're gamers.
It's terrible.
But I mean, Gabriel and I have been together longer than any of that put together. But the game night thing has really put together this community of gamers, and it's really cool. Like some of them don't play Magic, and that's fine.
If you don't have,
I
that
just
group,
played
start
a
it.
hollow one
Yeah.
Oh God! All right,
because I cycled. So I've got a pillow for
there's a
them.
hollow one over here too in this deck, but
Y'all met at the con, right? Like, no mutual friends before?
Yep.
Rick.
That's how you do it.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
like,
okay.
but
Be a
we
nerd.
were introduced by
It's
by
your
Rick.
And the one of
Go ahead.
so I part-time worked for a D&D t-shirt company, and I taught most of the company how to play Magic because
Oh, that's
I wanted
awesome.
somebody to play
That's
Magic
fucking
with.
awesome.
Shit. I just got 2 snakes.
Did you
on
you
top.
forgot about your snakes?
And like we met Evan at the local game store.
Yep.
I met Jake
Solid
literally for
plasma.
a table of Magic cards at a con. I mean, you just gotta.
So you met your boy over table mat, flashing your moves to buy cards.
I was not even. I think I was like wearing this or something. Like this was about as booby as it got. So. You know,
I mean, how
meant to
deep were
be.
you digging in the boxes?
I dug through the entire box.
I'm surprised you're the. I'm
I
the
needed
one
an
that got-
excuse to spend time there. Okay.
I'm surprised I'm the one that got con credit, not you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was trying to
You
place it.
don't.
The thing I don't like. What does it do again?
The Trigon Predator, it's
Yeah.
a 2/3 flyer. Whenever it hits an opponent, it destroys an artifact or
Yep,
enchantment.
that's why I don't like it. Yep,
It
yep,
doesn't matter. He's a vampire.
T20.
So
Who
But yeah,
says-
just go to-
Who says I'm not already?
Right. Just go to cons and like bat signal that you're a nerd, basically.
And bat signal.
If you go to specific cons, they know you're a nerd. You
Oh,
go
yeah,
to Dragon
like, you
Con,
just show up.
you're a nerd.
go to the game rooms at the con.
Yeah.
You go to Gen Con or Origins,
Alright, what are
you're
you
a
playing over there?
nerd.
Yeah.
So
Like,
I'm playing a kicked
mean-
dismantling blow.
All right.
So
I like
I'm
concept better
killing
Magic
the
for
thing.
friends,
I
like,
thought that was
that
artifact or
does.
enchantment, dismantling blow.
It is. Isn't that an artifact creature?
No, it's a beast. It's a
Oh,
flying
yeah,
beast.
sorry.
poop.
Here, sorry.
No, there was something else that was an artifact creature.
My psychosis crawler.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep. That one.
Golgari Charm. I'm gonna regenerate all creatures I control. Fuck you, because I need that in play. That's my win con.
Oh.
Now we know.
Now we know.
Yeah, it's okay. It's pretty obvious that's my win con.
Yep. So then land.
You
for
said that like
turn,
I'm paying attention.
Yeah, right?
And take her up to 7
Oh, fuck.
to untap my 2
What's her
lands.
ultimate?
Um,
And how much?
the ultimate is 7, and it's the top 7 cards into the from the library into the graveyard, and then you
And-
return all,
Enchantments.
and then you return all auras.
Yeah.
So chaos muppetry.
It's not chaos muppetry. It's
Look, I have little snake friends.
yeah.
Snake friend.
Somebody's been coming after me, not that. You done?
Hold on.
Snake friends.
Mullen, I just moved 10 minutes away so I can be closer to my nerds. So I understand.
And next Friday is game night.
Yep.
That's
So
true.
I won't be here on
Next
Thursday because I
4.
need to sleep
Icy
eventually.
manipulator.
Oh, hey. Wow, that's 2 things that tap things, huh?
Yes.
Yep.
How much mana do you need to use that?
Just 1.
Yep.
And now I'm done.
Alright. Untap, upkeep, draw. Everybody lose a life. I'm going to tap the Soul Ring for a Scroll of Fate.
What does
That's
that do?
new from the Commander set.
Yeah, pull that up.
I can tap that to manifest a card from my hand.
That's not good.
Scroll of Fate.
The hollow one looks so angry, like it smelled something terrible. It's like,
That
no.
one is awesome.
Alright, so let's see.
Have you seen the deck lists for the Brawl decks?
No.
Some of I haven't seen the new cards because they weren't loaded into the system yet, but there's one that's called like Fairy Schemes.
Everybody lose
And
3
I-
life.
3?
I'm urban evolutioning. I draw 3 cards and I can put 2 lands into play. 1, 2, 3. And none of it was a land. That's unfortunate.
I think I'm just gonna die slowly by you drawing cards.
That's kind of what the deck
Everyone.
does.
And now his...
Well, no, because my commander's not in play, because you killed it. However, I am entering my... Oh, you know what?
By the way, want to know something funny? That's something funny.
Fine, I'm entering my end step. And during my end step, I manifest. And pass turn. So, that deck is tutored twice. How much do you want to make a bet? At least one of it is an Exsanguinate.
Yeah.
Could be.
That would be a 10-point Exsanguinate right now. 12-point if she plays land.
Yeah. Did I drop? Did I drop?
Yeah.
Just kidding. Need a toll.
What do I want to do?
I'm going to make one more drink because it's 16 minutes to my birthday.
Let me know when it's
You
the
don't
end
have
of
a
your
problem
turn
with this
because
play.
I have things.
You
Oh, nice.
only need 2 mana for that.
I know. I'm playing something else.
Oh.
What is
I
it?
tapped.
Cryptcast.
doubles.
It's another black mana doubler.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Somebody needs to wipe the board.
No, I didn't.
No, so don't count this way.
You will note
So
I did not
count your
attack you with the
Cryptcast
Predator.
first.
Okay.
That's
did.
the 4 you need. And now, these... Wait, so how much does this end up being? Like, how much is one swamp?
It's 3 now.
3.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this would be 6.
That's, yes.
And then those
Because
two
it's
tap
not
for
a
3.
doubler, it's +1.
She
So
just
tap- you
played
need
a
to tap the other
cage
two.
fund. She played a
Yeah.
cage.
So all swamps tap for 4 now.
Nice.
I chose the wrong
Did you-
deck to play. I should have
Did
chosen
you
the one that had
really
black.
want you just keep painting the target
I
bigger
know,
and bigger. Like
it's
you put like 3
bad.
extra circles around the
Look,
target.
there are
on your
only
head.
so many things in my hand I can play this game.
I'm the only one I think who doesn't benefit from the black man.
Does that double like it for everyone or no?
This Booker's is awesome, thank you.
No.
I guess I
for-
could not play that right now.
By the way, I will show the stream.
I'll take
This
a little
is
bit of
the-
the hate off. And
This
I
is
won't
the
play
lovely
that.
present that Jay Brary and NPC bought for me for my birthday, and it is
Yep.
wonderful because it's almost half gone.
I'll be
Not
nice
my
and not
fault.
play the Cage Sun at this moment.
No, you probably should. I
No, we're fine.
What are you doing now?
None of us are playing counter spells.
I mean, you know.
Why not do a 40-point Exsanguinate if you can?
I know that deck originally has a counterspell in it somewhere.
Jeez.
And it would be a morph creature.
Yeah, right?
Wait, what are they counting for?
No, actually, the one that comes with that deck
Yeah.
is a change target.
No.
Yeah, it's a change target. Sure. It's nice midnight. Do you have to go in or you working from home?
Oh, I do want to play that.
Oh, that sucks. I have to make sure I'm awake and at my computer at 10 because tool tickets go on sale at 10.
Yeah. Good luck.
Hey, you'd be in for a rare treat. I've seen Tool a bunch and I've seen Purple Circle a bunch.
I'm not gonna play the Crypt.
I'd love to see it on this
too.
channel. Yeah, but it's right downtown. So we go have dinner and go watch the show.
Okay.
How much are tickets?
They're gonna be like 100 bucks a piece.
Ridiculous. Worth it though?
Yeah.
If only I wasn't locked out of my credit card right now.
No.
It
No.
was a whole thing. Okay, so I'm gonna play the Cage Sun. I'm not gonna play the Cryptcast. Is that funny?
Okay.
But you still have to tap a shit ton of
I know.
stuff.
So I'm counting how much I'm tapping right now.
You need 3 with the Nirkana. You need 3 for the sun.
Yeah.
And then you have 3, 6, 9 or 2, 4, 6 left.
Okay.
Well, no. Now that that's
No,
in,
I-
that's 3, 6, 9.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I'm assuming black creatures are +1/+1.
Yes.
So at the end of your turn, fuck. That's
She has
totally...
way too much mana, so if you can force a board wipe, you probably should.
You could just ask.
No, I can't actually do that.
You could just ask.
Never mind. Like, that's not actually gonna affect you because I can't read the fucking card.
It is
What are you
trying to
not
do?
great.
I'm killing your thing that's boosting your morph creatures.
It's not great for what it's supposed
Sure.
to be.
Your Like, because I'm tired of them being bigger.
Wait, you killed out of everything in play, this is the thing you killed with the cage? Oh, whatever.
I can't kill artifacts.
Oh, it's just enchantments? Got it.
Like, if I
The
trust
only
me,
enchantments I have right now are
Well, yeah, but
land stuff.
there are things that make, like, oh, I don't know, Sphere of Safety. Is there? I'm sure there's a sphere in there, right? Really?
No, I don't know.
I mean, my Esther deck is a
Yeah.
prison deck, so it's cage,
Yeah.
cage, whatever, cage spirit, whatever it is, spirit, whatever.
Yeah.
You get to attack, propaganda,
Yeah, so
Sphere of
I have
Safety.
like propaganda and stuff like that.
blind
Didn't-
obedience.
I didn't,
it's
like-
the whole suite.
I didn't stacks it out too bad because the playgroup I used to play with, there would be some very salty people in there if I locked them out.
Yeah, you know what though, like there are certain we don't do wholesale land destruction here, and we don't do like locks. Like stacks would annoy the piss out of everybody at this table. And I mean,
playing,
we okay, stacks is a one-trick pony. You play it, we know how to beat it.
Yeah.
Faith of the Devoted.
That's the card.
What?
That is the card that turbocharges Anya.
Yes.
What is
Yes,
it called?
it is.
The black one they just played?
Faith of the Devoted.
Right. So every time you cycle or discard a card, we lose 2 life.
It's so good.
All of us. So in Anya, what happens is, right? In Anya, you tap her, discard a card with Madness, we each lose 2 life. Guess what? It's a card with Madness, I untap Anya.
Yep.
I tap her again, we each lose 2 life, discard a card with Madness. And I don't care if I'm even playing the Madness cards.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know.
And then that's when you stuff your deck full of all the cycling lands.
Yeah, like that's...
Well, you only have so many. She's a red-black commander.
So there's 4. There's 2 colorless, so there's 6.
No. There's an enchantment, which I have in my Chandra deck, which will give your land cycling. By the way.
Is it red?
Yes. It is red.
Oh.
I will show it to
That's
you.
nice. Yeah.
Let me pull
Anybody
that
know what
for
that
you.
is? I'll pull it up, because
Yeah.
that's kind of cool.
Give me a second to play my turn. I feel like I need my pillow fort of snakes.
So yeah, out of almost 3.01 million frames, we dropped 126. I'm okay with this.
So I
No. Over the
am
course
going
of
to
the
come
entire
at
2.5,
you
3 hours.
Or sorry, Estridge is gonna have my 4/4
Which means
golem.
we don't have to
thrown
run
at,
a line to the
and
garage.
then I'm gonna have a Petra go at you
That's
for
the only thing
2.
you needed.
No, we don't have to run an Ethernet
So
cable.
you could leave Estridge where it
See that
is
thing
and
up there
tap
above
the
the
1
TV?
land.
Yeah.
Or,
So that's beam
Yep,
formatted.
yep. I'm just gonna...
And
But
the
take the
table
2.
is
Tap
actually
and take
just
the
as
2,
thick as
yeah.
the garage
Okay.
wall. So
Yeah.
we're gonna have the same
So-
size as the
You're gonna
garage.
kill me just with
Petra.
Batra.
It's like a slow climb.
It's a
Like
very
It's a
remember, Kid
slow
Rock
burn.
was doing like
It-
8 a pop.
It's a very slow, predictable death.
Let's see. So now
just
that
bought
the
that
morph
deck.
things are smaller, I have the option to keep like you from doing like the one is allowing you to basically take the top card of your library and
But it's not making you lose life or anything.
no, this one.
Yeah.
Like that is allowing these, right?
That's allowing the manifests, yeah.
Fuck. Okay, fine. I get to counter on it.
Yep.
An additional one because I did damage to her.
So you did damage to her, it gets the counter.
It gets another.
Why does it get... Oh, yeah, it's going to go to 3
Yeah.
Yes,
from 2.
and then,
then
do I
just
have a
gonna-
land? No.
So like, and then land for turn. No, okay.
No.
Like,
But-
you know what Esther... Like, I'm literally at the end of this
But-
game, I'm just going to look
but-
at you and go, you know what Esther
In
does,
her
and
defense,
you chose...
normally I have way more on the board by now. I'm not pulling a lot of gas.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I know what Esther does.
Okay.
yeah, we all know what Esther does. You're whatever the... Oh, Liliana, right. We let you tutor twice.
Yes.
Right, because we're dumb.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
That
go.
was a personal life
Let me
choice.
see.
Yeah, I know. We let you tutor twice.
Once again, slow but predictable
see,
death.
because I had to slam on you the last turn, I'm like,
Right.
I just felt bad. I just couldn't. Yes, I have like a red cycling.
really
deck.
wanna-
Ah!
So you should have played the Cryptcast.
Whoops.
I still don't
I
have
know
my
that
Naheb.
When it hits you, it blows up an Artifact Root Gym.
Don't do it.
Really?
Ugh.
Don't do it.
Why?
Yeah, okay.
Killer shit.
So, are you gonna help me if I don't do that?
Sure, what would you like?
I would like you to not exsanguinate ever.
Yeah, okay.
Not
No.
expecting that?
John just played Anya. The deck is bananas, and there are certain ways to turbocharge it. Like this stupid thing that NPC just played in her deck.
Yeah, I just bought it.
Now that you told me, though, I think I have an extra
Yeah.
one of that
So
one.
Yeah, I know
every
what it is,
fucking
yeah.
Faith of the Devoted, every time you cycle or discard a card, pay 1 and each opponent loses 2 life. So in think about that. Anya, pay 1. Everybody loses 2 life, and maybe I'll cast the Madness card. Then I'll untap Anya. I'll do it again. Maybe I'll pay 1. Maybe I'll cast the Madness card. Who cares?
So,
It's
just played
nutty.
Heavenly Blade Master.
Oh, how many things are getting attached to that?
Currently,
Nothing.
nothing. But Estrid is able to ultimate, so I'm going to ultimate Estrid.
All right, this is gonna be fun.
So hopefully the top
Not with.
7 cards.
All right, so
are
Estrid is
good.
ulting now.
So
Here we
1,
go.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Do you have to reveal?
Good.
7. Yep, so they
Yeah,
go into my
flip 'em.
graveyard.
Go ahead and flip them up because the stream can see it. Hold it
Yeah.
up a little bit,
Here.
a little
So-
higher. There you go.
So, with,
Is that an enchantment creature?
Yeah,
Tuvasa
it's-
is not.
No.
Oh, I thought she was an enchantment
With-
creature.
Propaganda!
Nice.
And an
Oh
enchantment
my
creature.
god, that was it?
That was so awful.
Well, you know what? A propaganda and all your shit flies and none of our
Yeah.
shit can fly is pretty okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of land. I got rid of a lot of land. That's good.
Thank God. Did you have to kill her or is she at 1?
Oh, she's dead. But I could play her
So,
again next
question,
That was your second, so this will be your third, so you need
Yeah.
how
Fine.
much is she? 4, 5, 6, 7?
she's 4, so she'll be 8
There you
next
go.
time.
Here are the 2 that would probably be useful.
Seismic
That's
Assault
like-
is not as useful as you think, but
Nope.
the Tectonic is.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Tectonic's super useful.
And I still
In
have.
Anya, it's going to be amazing. You have a foil, too.
Yeah.
Is Madame
So it's this
finished?
Ooh,
Every turn is your
I like that. Yeah. Actually, no. I'm going to move I would have done it when it came in, but the mask onto the Heavenly Blade Master because you can
Okay.
move enchantments onto her.
Gotcha.
So that is my turn, and I still have mana open for the manipulator.
I'm going to scroll a fate to manifest a creature.
So sad, my shaman.
Jesus. I don't even fucking remember what these things are.
Right? That's why I don't play that.
Everybody's surprised.
And you get a morph creature. And you get a morph creature.
I don't have the emotional, like, ability to do more creatures.
No.
I have a ton of.
I can't remember, like, Bantu's Monument.
Like, all right, untap, upkeep. That's a morph creature. Draw.
I forget.
Everybody lose a life.
I forget
No.
draw triggers
Yeah, me too. All the time.
all the time.
Like, all game.
Yeah.
Every time.
The first game I played with Anya, completely forgot that you got to.
Who gave me the zombie squirrel?
What?
Like, it's in my Tantra deck. And I'm like, probably because I didn't have my Get Rug deck with me the last time. So, zombie
I'm
squirrel
gonna
needs to go
tap that to
there.
manifest this.
Or I especially forget if I've drawn if I draw and then play a land.
I
Like
can't-
2 turns ago?
Yeah, yeah. If I don't play a land the first thing, I have no idea if I played a land or not. I'm just like,
Nope, no idea.
I don't know.
Totally fucked.
Yep.
Oh, there's my Get Rug deck.
I'm gonna enter my
What
end
did you
step.
manifest?
I tapped this to manifest a creature from my hand.
Okay.
Alright, enter my end step. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna hit you for... Wait, hold on. What's going on?
Hit who?
I still have mostly a whole lot of nothing.
Oh, God. God, I want to kill the Sage Sun. Do I get at least a round before you exsanguinate or anything?
If you don't touch my Cage Sun or any of my creatures or do anything to me in any way for 2 turns.
Fuck your Cage Sun. No,
That's a pretty sweet deal when you know what this deck does. And
I
you've
know,
tweaked it.
I know. We're good. I think what we're gonna do right now is attack NPC and blow up the fucking.
It doesn't have flying. So I will kill it with a snake.
Oh, you're right. It doesn't have flying.
Happily.
God damn it.
Like, come at me, bro.
I love that that's like your catchphrase for Magic.
Come at me, bro. It really, you're yeah. We all should have little
Because it's
nicknames.
always to him coming at your shit.
Yeah.
Well, it's I'm coming at. Yours is come at me, bro, and yours is fuck that thing. It really is fuck that thing.
No,
It's fuck that thing?
NPCs,
We haven't-
NPCs is something else.
Mine's fuck that thing and
There is
also
Come
like,
at me, bro.
fuck
No,
it.
it's come at me,
talking
bro.
about suck it.
Yeah, suck it.
Yeah, that one's
I
right.
haven't said suck it in a while, though.
I know.
Fuck it's a playstyle. That's been my
All right, fine. I'm gonna fucking pass turn. What's everybody's life totals at?
30.
27.
Okay, pass turn.
Slowly ticking
dying.
away. I shouldn't have reminded you.
What?
Like, I should have just killed it.
Thank you.
But
I
it's a
appreciate
friendly
it.
game,
Yeah, like,
so I was like, okay.
It's a friendly game until someone has to die.
Yeah.
Legit.
3, 6, 9, 12. 3. 3, 6, 9, 12.
Until
Everything
she
except for
plays the Crypt Gas.
Yes.
10,
Aww.
8,
Aww.
7, 6,
Oh, wait a second.
5,
Is that Bunny?
4,
Hey,
3,
buddy.
Hey.
2, 1.
Happy birthday
Yay,
to
cheers.
DM! Drink, bitches.
Yay! Happy birthday!
Happy birthday.
Drink your beverage.
Thank you, stream. It is my birthday.
It is officially your birthday. In 24 hours, it'll be my birthday.
And-
Yeah.
wait, one more. Happy
One more,
birthday,
happy
Jay
birthday.
What's up, Solid Plasma?
Hey.
Hello.
And Bunny is on.
Hey, Bonnie.
Nice to see you, Bunny. I am passing your.
Hello, Rachel Xander. The Rachel
The
Xander.
Rachel
Wow,
Xander.
we have lots of people.
Wow.
Oh, hey.
Did somebody just raid us?
No, we're still 13.
Oh,
Nice.
birthday raid.
Quite
Purple Link.
sneaky.
Aw,
raid.
thanks, folks. I appreciate it. Happy
So,
birthday, raid.
wait a second. Purple Link 33. Is this like Link from Legend of Zelda Link?
I don't know,
We are
but
going to pretend that it is until you tell us that it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like.
I'm just picturing like Zelda with a sort
No.
of. I've smoked a lot of dope purple haze over everything, so off we go.
Yeah, I am into that cosplay.
Did you?
Thanks, John.
I mean, yeah.
Did you
There
see
we
the
go.
Luke and Navi cosplay
Yes.
at Gen Con where Navi had the megaphone?
Yep.
Nice.
There was one of the best cosplays we saw, and we were sitting eating lunch. Doctor
Wait,
Strange came in
is there something
with
we
his
should be
cloak
sure-
behind him as a separate cosplay.
Oh, yeah, that was
his
funny.
cloak was following around, and like it was somebody with a
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was really cool.
Jake and I are going to do Princess Bubblegum.
So this is this is a new computer I just built for streaming, and it's got the follower notifications, but doesn't have the raid stuff set up yet. I have to go help. She's got to help me set up the
The stream key is off.
stream key stuff.
Bunny. Bunny's watching?
Yeah, Bunny's here.
Hey, Bunny. I got you a pin.
Oh, what was the pin? What does the pin say?
Bunny's in my brain.
Nice.
From Dragon Con.
And Bunny, I have the sticker from you that's like Evil Bunny's Empire. Yeah.
Bunny, you are the reason I can sleep at night. Literally,
Aww.
because I'm still breaking off little ones off of that.
By the
little
way, no
square.
one can see this, but I've got a swearing is caring pin.
wait. Oh, yes, we can see it. Wait, you ready? There you go. Swearing's caring. Maybe
It's
not.
hard to
They
see.
can see it
Yeah.
exists.
They can see that it exists.
And I don't feel like unpinning it, so sorry.
Let's
Fuck you.
not.
Say hi. Wave to the
Let's
camera.
not do that.
Wait. Look right at the little black circle up there. I don't know. Who's doing what? What are you doing over there?
I was counting my
Val?
mana.
3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21.
Exsanguinate.
She promised she wouldn't for a turn.
Yeah,
I don't
or
know
not.
why she would do that. Especially since nothing had flying. Why?
I don't know.
Like, ooh, oh no, send your ground Targon Predator to Hythonia so Hythonia could eat it for
helps
lunch.
so much.
She'll be here in October, so if you want stuff.
I don't
I'll-
know if I'll be here in October though. It depends
Well,
on when.
I can literally hand you
Facilitate
something
that?
from her.
Let's do that. I also.
It's gonna be
Probably
early
have a
October
party by
too. It's like the
That's fine.
10th or
I'm
something.
going to Oaks
Speaking
on.
of which,
Oh, thanks, Solid Plasma.
Yay!
Meh. Sorry.
Good shapes.
oh, don't
Die.
please don't. It's like, yay, birthday.
No, I was laughing, and she's like, quietly, she's like, gay sheeps, gay sheeps.
Did you not know me by now?
I
Where are
was-
my walrus
oh.
feet?
Where are your walrus feet?
Walrus feet.
Wait, go take your turn. I'll pick them up. And this
counting
is
them.
this is why we love playing with each other, because people bring pajamas and kind of play in their pajamas sometimes, and they're little walrus feet, little walrus booties.
I also usually have zebras when I'm here because I'm a zebra. Jeez. Good times.
This
Solid Plasma, what's your new game? For out
is the Battle Royale. Oh.
I love this song.
Oh wait, hence the Cattle Royale. Okay.
It is the fisting hour and my birthday.
Yeah.
Huzzah! All right, what are you doing over there?
I'm counting.
Black Magic Pass.
Hang on.
Wait for it.
Really? Is that my birthday present?
Birthdays.
Like bird claws touching me in the face? Thank you, dear.
I gave you bourbon.
You did give me bourbon. It's awesome.
9.
Very awesome. It's great bourbon.
9.
A second time.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't make math.
Do you need help?
Yeah.
What are you trying to do? Okay, you need 2 for that.
I know.
And you should probably tap another one and extort. Oh no, you can't extort the
I
spell.
can't.
Yeah. So you need 2 for that.
Yeah.
There you go.
But what are they now? 4s?
So now they tap all for 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes.
Okay.
And since there's an Urborg in play, they are all swamps.
You need a little more.
No,
than
she
that.
doesn't.
No.
Wait. Oh, right.
She has
yeah.
2 extra after that.
Yep.
Oh, I would assume you're using 1 of that to extort.
Yes.
Everybody lose 1. You gain 3. You still got 4, 8, 12 left.
I know.
What did you play then?
Carnifex Demon. Oh, let me bring that up, because
Yeah,
people aren't
bring
sure
that
what
up.
the Carnifex Demon
That's
does.
Regular on my deck. It is new.
And yeah, it's important. So, it enters the battlefield with 2 -1/-1 counters on it, right?
Nice. I get to proliferate if I play a
Yeah, but the problem is
But
she's
then
gonna
you-
wipe out everybody's board right now.
Yeah.
Right now.
She's gonna remove 2 with 1 mana and give everything -1, -1, -2, -2.
Aw.
Yeah,
Am I though?
you probably should.
I know. Wait, does it have a mine too?
Yes. Each other
Other,
creature. So your crit cast would be
Well,
dead.
so I would take 1 off and
Yeah,
blow away all the snakes.
Aw.
Yeah,
The
I think
snake's
that.
coming my way though?
No.
The snakes
Oh
are just
my.
kind of sitting there.
How long will the snake stay?
I think you're out of your mind.
I've been attacking him.
But now
Haven't
you can
I?
just-
What
Hold it up.
is happening over here? Do we know what these are? Do we know
They're
what these are?
they're all 2/2s.
So
Oh,
if you
yeah,
remove
so
2,
you'd
you
kill-
would wipe
Yeah.
his and her.
But if
board.
you remove 2, you're killing
All right,
your
hold
crit
on. I
cast.
got a bunch of morphs before that happens.
Oh, wait. He's going to flip them all.
I got a bunch. Yeah, they're not gonna die.
Oh, wait. But you can't flip them all.
They're
can
still
you?
gonna get -1, -2, -2s. I can flip them anytime I want.
I don't know the.
Yes,
morph
but you
mechanic.
still have to pay.
I have 8 mana. I didn't do anything on my turn.
I don't know. I don't know the morph situation.
Right, you don't know what's underneath them all.
I don't, but they'd all have to be tiny because
Well,
you've got.
Some are tiny, some are not. You decide what you want to do.
I don't understand morph is what I'm trying to tell you.
I gotcha. So
You'd have to spend 2 to kill
manifests
them
and morphs, right? If it's a manifest, and there's a creature underneath it, or a permanent, basically, I can play it for its casting cost.
Get something
Right?
that's specific.
Well, it could be a creature, a big creature, or a
But you
creature
know
that
what
has
it
an
is,
effect.
yeah?
I know what it is. You guys, right?
Is it all the same or not?
No, they're all
Yeah.
different. It's a commander deck, so they cannot be the same,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, right. Okay.
So I can tell you straight up, all but one are creatures.
You got lucky.
Well, yeah, I did. Actually, all but two are creatures. I'll take that back, and I'll give you that.
I mean,
There are snakes on this plane, or maybe not.
what was our,
Or maybe there's really big snakes on this
what
plane.
was our current agreement?
You weren't gonna fuck with me. I wasn't gonna fuck with you.
For how long?
2 turns.
Okay.
Did she agree to do
There should be 2 -1s, so it's a
No, I
4/4.
Took one off.
Oh, you did. So everything gets -1.
So, killing my snake?
I'm asking if we're friends.
We're
and
friends
how
right
long.
now. We are friends right now.
So you killed
I'm
my
not gonna attack.
snakes.
Everything
Great.
gets -1, -1.
You know what, then? You killed my snakes, I'm killing your crypt gas.
Is it
That's
counters or is it until end of turn?
Why? That's only 1 counter.
Yes, but the crypt gas is part of the ones that gets a negative counter.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right.
Like,
Hold on. I gotta look at a couple of things before shit
Hi,
happens.
Banshee.
and guess
Hi, Banshee.
what? Because I placed a counter, I get a snake back.
Yep, there you go.
Except now I've got to put negative counters on everything.
I know, right?
And how do I keep track of that? I mean, mine doesn't really
But these
boost
both
my
get
stuff,
-1 counters,
so...
too.
Yeah. Can't wait until I play a land.
Alright. I actually don't want to morph anything right now.
Because it's not dead yet.
Yeah. I'm putting the -1 counters in the bottom left of every creature. Oh, my Whisperwood dies.
Nice.
Sacrifice
At this
it.
point.
In response to that, I'm going to sack it and I manifest 1.
I don't like that.
Yeah, when he's cackling, it's
Nope.
a problem. Are you done? What are you doing?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure
It's
out
still
what's
your
going on over
turn.
And that does not get
It's
the
still
-1.
your turn. You did pay the swamp for that, right?
What?
For what?
This.
I had 2 here left over.
Okay. Well, you paid 1 for extort, so.
Oh
you
god,
only
this is
have-
ridiculous.
So
There's
there's nothing here now.
There's
Yeah.
way too much manifest on my board.
Yes.
And now that you did that, your remaining lands are only 9.
Enough to go monstrous if need be.
Mm-hmm.
I am done. Wait.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so mine are 1+1, so can I just take these counters off, or does that actually...
No.
No,
They-
because
They don't
you're
get
paying-
+1
matters.
counters, they're
I'm
+1
just gonna put
from
them
this.
up here so that I know that they're actually
Yeah.
what
It's
they
also-
because my brain like can't.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
This also gets one.
Yeah. No,
No,
other creature.
it does not get a
That gets
negative
bigger
counter.
when you take the minuses off.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what I thought.
wait.
I need to look again. God damn it!
Ugh, this is gonna suck, but be fantastic at the same time.
You do it. Do it.
Gotta do it. Yeah, gotta do it. Well, do I gotta do it? Yeah, I gotta do it. Because
This
it's
is
gotten real.
This is gonna be ridiculous.
But we're into that.
Actually, first...
It's gonna be hilarious and ridiculous.
well, yeah, this is... I suspect you're gonna have to do something in response to this because...
I don't care. I don't care. It's really gonna be hilarious and ridiculous. I've never actually played this card in a Commander game ever.
Oh no.
That's
Yeah.
not a good thing to
Is
hear.
it?
I know, right? It's never a good thing to hear. Like, I want to see what happens.
Okay.
Get
I am tapping 5 and I'm going to play Massacre Girl.
All right.
And I think it's going to kill...
No, it's not.
What?
I'm paying 5.
I was holding her last game.
I am turning every creature that's not face down, face down. They all become 2/2s. Everything in play becomes a 2/2 morph creature.
That's
What?
amusing.
Let me see what you're playing.
Yeah, hold on.
Come on.
If it's
You have to bring it up.
Ixodron. As it enters the battlefield, all other turn all other non-token
Should've
creatures
known.
face down.
Did this
How does that work on the stack?
It comes in and flips, so it enters the play. It's in, right? It gives everything a -1. However, everything turns into a 2/2 creature. Nothing will die.
Remember that time you said it wouldn't fuck with me for 2 turns?
Are you kidding me? I stopped the board wipe.
Wait, no, I'm just giving you shit.
if it's enchanted, does it stay enchanted?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, now I have a
So my Trigon Predator,
Have
and
totem armor
everything
on
with
the
-1
2/2, so that
-1
doesn't
counters
do
still has
anything.
-1 counters.
I mean, that could still be good for you, though.
true.
Who knows how these games will go?
So flip everything upside down. They're all 2/2 creatures, and they keep their -1 counters.
What's sad is imagine your snakes.
Non-tokens.
bigger.
That thing. Was
Yeah, the tokens stay as snakes.
Yeah.
So
Well, hold
they're
on,
all
non-tokens.
one-ones. Still a Death's Head Snake then.
Yep.
So they're all actually 1/1s.
Oh wait, that might wipe the board. There's a token in play.
Yeah.
The token dies of the Massacre Girl.
That's what she was saying. Everything should die.
Wait, hold on. Let me read Massacre Girl again.
Okay.
Let's compare these two cards.
Let's think about what's happening.
All right. So this comes in
is bad.
when it enters the battlefield, right?
Yeah.
Each other creature gets -1/-1 until the end of the turn.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to kill that.
And then...
However, whenever a creature dies, each creature other than Massacre, it's going to kill everything.
Everything dies, right?
Hold on. Yep, it's going to kill everything.
Except for my one.
Yeah, that's why I was saying that.
However, hold on.
Oh, are you?
Oh, I'm going to draw a shit ton of cards.
Oh no.
I am also flipping the Grim Haruspex. Whenever another non-token creature I control dies, draw a card.
Go for it.
Right? Anything else I want to flip? I cannot pay for the Psychosis Crawler. God damn it.
Ha!
The Segu Mauler is going to live because it's only going to get -2/-2.
But does that mean
I don't have enough
Massacre
mana.
Girl dies herself
Yeah.
because she flips
She's a 2/2.
them? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's alright. 1.
And then my -1 counter falls off because the totem armor fell off.
Yeah. Yes. If creature
Because
would
it
be.
would die.
That's like the
but
only
then it
creature on the
didn't,
board now, right?
But it stays.
Yeah. This stays. The totem armor goes
Right.
away. Does
Okay.
the -1 counter stay?
Dies.
No.
Yes. The -1 counter
Okay.
stays because it didn't die if
Yeah.
it would die.
No, shit, that's fine.
Okay. So,
Oh wait, hold on. And Ixodron's power and toughness was equal to now it and
Now it's a 1/1. Because you.
no,
have
that's
one.
still face down.
Yeah. Is it not equal to power and toughness?
Right.
of-
I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, it's gonna die.
Oh yeah, because it still has a.
It's gonna die. It has a -1 counter
Yeah.
on it, and there's not enough face down creatures. All right, so I'm gonna draw 7 cards.
Oh my goodness.
And that's the board wipe.
I do not feel bad about this decision.
No, that was the board wipe.
Don't either. Like,
Why is that still alive? Oh, because it had a totem
they
armor.
had a totem armor.
Well, wait. It's not destroyed. It dies because it has no toughness.
Yeah. So,
We're not. Does it say would be destroyed or would be put into a graveyard?
It says destroy, but it says instead remove all damage from it.
There's no damage.
There
It's
is no
minuses.
damage,
Yeah,
right?
that's a board
Yeah.
wipe. That's a pure fucking board wipe. God damn it.
It's even better than one of my boards.
Yeah, Massacre Girl is fucking fantastic. It's ridiculous.
Maybe one of
All right, so 1, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow, that's a lot of cards in my hand. All right. NPC, are you done? You fucking done with that abortion of a turn?
Yeah.
That was some chaos muppetry.
Oh my god.
Wait. 2, 3, 4.
Do I get to go?
I have
Yes.
12 cards in my
You
hand
get to go. Yeah.
until the end of my turn. I have
She
12 cards
has
in my
a-
hand.
She has a bear deck.
I do.
She has Mama Bear. What's Mama Bear's
I'm
name?
Garclaw.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh no, grizzly bears. Trust me, bears is a thing now. Like, we don't have to try to make
Especially
bears
with,
appear.
Bears is a thing now.
Yeah, Ayla or whatever her name is.
Ayla, yeah.
Hey, by the way,
Queen of bears.
I made bears cool before that came out.
Motherfucker, at our you were at that pre-release, 2 of the people I played against had her and got her into play like 2 out of the 3 games. Her and a bunch of those little, I make a 2/2 bear token and I bring another bear token back. Fuckers.
She's so pretty.
I think I can still
Bear.
play Esther, baby. One,
How much is Esther? 3?
1, 2. So she's 4, so I have
4,
1 of
8,
each, plus
4,
1,
5, 6,
plus
7,
2,
8.
plus 2.
You literally have enough to play Esther.
Yeah.
Fucker. And you still have an
That's-
Icy Manipulator, a Tyrant's Machine, and a Propaganda in play.
Yeah, and I'm going to plus her back to 5
That was hard.
to untap the 1 land so I can use Icy Manipulator.
There you go. Done.
I thought you had 2 enchanted lands.
I had moved the
Oh.
enchantment onto my major whiff.
Wait, you can move?
So
enchantments?
when she enters,
Oh,
you can
I
move.
see,
So I
yeah,
moved it
so
onto
you-
her, thinking,
I'm assuming you're
I'll
done?
Yeah.
I'm gonna play Kadena again.
I'll eventually make her big. That didn't happen. Oh, actually, it doesn't change anything for you, but I'm playing a land and it bounces a different land back. to my hand.
Gotcha.
I'll be back.
I'm gonna play that for free and draw a card. Play a land for turn. Yep. All of the new commanders let you draw a card when you do something.
What's happening?
Right? No, except for Savine. The other ones, wait, no, sorry, 2 of them do. Anya
Yeah.
and this one. The other one's Populate and the other one's Madness.
Yeah.
Well, no,
No, because Anya draws a card.
the other one's Indestructible and double your fucking... Sorry, I played it last game.
Yep.
And let's see. I did that with that, and I am going to... Jesus. Fuck.
Be done.
No, there's so many better things to do, but that. Draw a card. Play a different land. Reliquary Tower. Pass turn.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
I should have played the Ape Snake.
No. No,
So upset 'cause I would just see all of my enchantments disappear across the table.
And I would be able to play them. They're permanents.
Yeah. You'd be able to play most of them, unless they had white.
Right. No. Oh, right. You
You
have to
have
play
to pay
the
the
actual colors,
actual-
not
yeah.
the CMC.
Yep.
I thought bears peaked when Savage Punch. Yeah. I actually know who has that original art.
What you make?
I haven't.
Savage Punch.
Yeah.
It's a dude punching a grizzly bear. I mean, like, come on.
It's-
I'm opening one. I brought one to sleeve it.
I see.
You tap for 2 now, right? So you need 8. Yep. And you actually have enough to pop her off right now?
I wanted to.
Yep.
I think she's gonna let us overextend ourselves again.
Go for it. See what happens.
What's happening?
I'm done. I put Antonio.
I see. Untap. Upkeep. Draw.
You ever read the story about the guy who gets like attacked by the bear and like doesn't die and like the bear's like over him, comes back like to kill him later and like still doesn't? It's pretty intense. And then he realizes
that
that,
sounds
like-
pretty gruesome.
Yeah, he realizes that like there were baby bears around or whatever where he was hiking.
Then he was an idiot. and-
Yeah.
That he was just in
Threatening
their
them.
space. And I think so like he got, like clawed by the bear and he like drove himself bleeding to the hospital like in his own truck or whatever and he's fine, like nothing.
And I
actually
appreciate the thanks for seeing another birthday without death. I have traversed the sun one more time without dying.
happened. You're a vampire.
I mean,
He may be slightly inebriated. Fuck you. There's no inebriation going on.
I mean,
None whatsoever.
We're gonna throw axes on Saturday, so
I
no
love the
time
fact that we're
for
going to a
that.
Viking place to throw fucking axes.
There's one opening up by my house.
Oh,
I'm
that's
so
all.
excited.
Like you can go from like the Virginia side of things
Yeah.
to the DC side of things to the Baltimore side of
Yep,
things,
you can
and
just
find
have
one in every
you
place.
can just have a day of throwing axes.
You know who can give you pointers on that? Jake,
I'm-
because that's what he was doing.
Sorry.
Oh.
I tapped 5
Yeah,
to
'cause
play a
I haven't-
Genesis.
Oh, that's lovely. Wait, hold on. Okay. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. I need my little morph tokens.
Okay,
Let me know. Yes, you may have the Genesis.
We need to change our title.
Why? What is our title?
It says new coven or new commander decks.
Oh.
I can change that right now.
I mean, you're playing one.
I am, but
Well, and he played another one.
Yeah. But it's not the pack opening for right now.
toolbars. Oops, sorry. Docks.
So 2 and a green.
So we do that right here.
Look
at that, I can do it right there.
Presents.
Nice. Now that it's working.
Good.
You can't select the game, right?
No, because there's no Magic the Gathering. So there's 2 titles that I need to go.
That is for nerds.
Yeah. Magic is for cake or death. Death up cake.
I had more cake. I totally went to the kitchen and sliced
Lamp
off a little piece.
return.
And was
Oh,
like,
yeah. Yeah, Cave Girl was like, yeah, just put the cake away. I'm like, yeah, you think there's going to be
Gotta
cake
survive,
left at 2
right?
a.m. Oh, that's adorable.
Not if I
What
had
a dream
any
world you
material.
live in where you think there'll still be cake left.
Right.
Yep.
God damn it, I need to keep looking.
How's those meds doing?
1, 2,
Shut it.
No, I mean, he's looking at his morph creatures,
Yeah.
so that's not
and
cheating.
a green to
No.
enchant.
When he looks at
Selesnya
the top of
Sanctuary.
his deck,
That's a lot of mana.
So now it taps for 4.
Wow, that thing's ridiculous.
You're ridiculous.
No, I'm looking around the table. Like, most of the damage was dealt by the Psychosis Crawler.
I
I need
think
to figure out a way to
horrible.
get back.
And then
no, it wasn't dealt by the Psychosis
4
Crawler.
Every time I drew a
One-
card, every took a point of damage?
put down
Oh,
4
yeah.
Marlet.
Yeah,
that-
it was dealt by the Psychosis Crawler.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was the one that was doing it.
4.
Yeah, that thing's terrible.
So it's got 4 right now. I draw a card because I played an
Oh,
enchantment.
no. Oh, wait a second. I thought about something.
Then I take her up to 7 to untap everything that is
All the
enchanted.
enchantments.
Oh, you share a birthday with one of my friend's sons.
You want to know the most ridiculous person I share a birthday with? Julius Caesar.
I share with Mr. T.
A pitiful doesn't respect your birthday.
No.
Do you know who I share a birthday with?
No.
Queen Elizabeth I.
Nice.
How regal.
Yes. I didn't get
know.
stabbed in the back.
I wanna like know now.
You should look at it. My mom had one of those books printed up when you're a kid, like, oh, look at the birthdays you share with.
You share a birthday with him, the small wee one.
No
who,
shit, I share a birthday
like-
with their kid?
Yes.
Who, like, unplugged the,
Yes.
unplugged the fucking speakers at your wedding?
Yes.
I